A millionaire made a humiliating bet with the cleaning lady. If her son could start his luxury car, he would pay her 10 million. Amid laughter and looks of contempt, the boy faced the challenge with a wrench in his grease-stained hands. The tension increased with each failed attempt until something surprising happened. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the immaculate lawn of the Caldwell estate in Westchester County, New York. The mansion, with its imposing columns and pristine white facade, stood as a monument to wealth and power. Inside, preparations for Robert Caldwell's annual charity gala were underway. The air was thick with the scent of fresh flowers and expensive cologne as caterers bustled about, setting up elaborate displays of food and drink. In the midst of this controlled chaos moved Sarah Mitchell, her shoulders slightly hunched from years of scrubbing floors and cleaning windows. At 42, her face bore the marks of a life lived in service to others, fine lines around her eyes from squinting at stubborn stains, calloused hands from harsh cleaning chemicals. Yet there remained a quiet dignity in her posture, a silent strength that had carried her through the hardest years of raising her son alone. Ms. Mitchell, the upstairs bathroom still need attention. Jennifer Wilson, Caldwell's executive assistant, said without looking up from her clipboard. Her voice was clipped, efficient. Mr. Caldwell's guests will be arriving in 3 hours. Sarah nodded, gathering her supplies. I'll head up right away. As she made her way toward the grand staircase, the mansion's front door swung open. Her small figure darted inside, backpack bouncing against his thin shoulders. Mom! 9-year-old Ethan Mitchell's face lit up when he spotted his mother. His sneakers, worn but meticulously clean, squeaked against the marble floor as he ran to her. Sarah's expression softened immediately. Ethan, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be at the after-school program. It ended early. Mrs. Gonzalez dropped me off. He glanced around nervously, aware he didn't belong in this world of crystal chandeliers and priceless art. I didn't know where else to go. Sarah sighed, checking her watch. She still had 3 bathrooms to clean before the guests arrived. Come with me, but stay quiet, okay? Mr. Caldwell doesn't like children in the house during preparations. Ethan nodded solemnly, following his mother up the sweeping staircase. While Sarah cleaned, he sat quietly on the edge of a bathtub, pulling out a small book from his backpack, Understanding Engines, a Beginner's Guide. The librarian had raised an eyebrow when he'd checked it out, but Ethan had been fascinated by machines since he could remember. That's a complex book for someone your age, Sarah remarked. Glancing at the diagrams of engine parts, Ethan shrugged. It makes sense to me. It's like puzzles, but with a purpose. He hesitated, then added, Mr. Rodriguez at the garage let me watch him work on an old Chevy yesterday. He showed me how the carburetor connects to the... There you are. Jennifer Wilson appeared in the doorway, her tailored suit unwrinkled despite the day's stress. Her gaze fell on Ethan, and her mouth tightened. Ms. Mitchell, you know the rules about family visitors during work hours. Sarah straightened, wiping her hands on her apron. I'm sorry, Ms. Wilson. His after-school program ended early, and I had no alternative arrangements. Jennifer's expression remained unmoved. Mr. Caldwell has arrived with his new Aston Martin. He's showing it off to some early guests in the circular driveway. He wants everything perfect. Her eyes flicked to Ethan again. Keep him out of sight until you finish your shift. After Jennifer left, Sarah knelt before her son. Just a few more hours, honey. Then we'll go home and have that mac and cheese you like. Outside, the rumble of an expensive engine announced Robert Caldwell's arrival. The man himself emerged from the driver's seat of a sleek silver Aston Martin, its metallic finish gleaming in the late afternoon sun. At 50, Caldwell carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to command. His tailored suit, his manicured hands, his carefully styled silver-streaked hair, everything about him spoke of privilege and power. A small group of early arrivals, business associates and local celebrities, gathered around the car, making appreciative noises. Caldwell smiled, basking in their admiration. 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds, he boasted, running a hand along the car's smooth contour. Cost more than most houses in this county. Worth every penny. From an upstairs window, Ethan watched the scene unfolding below. He'd never seen a car like that except in magazines. The way the light played off its curves fascinated him. Even from a distance, he could tell this was a machine built with precision and care. Later, as guests began to arrive in earnest, Sarah and Ethan slipped downstairs to wait in the staff area until her shift ended. They passed through the kitchen, where caterers rushed to arrange canapes on silver platters. Through the window, they could see the party spilling onto the back terrace, glasses clinking as New York's elite networked under string lights. A commotion from the front of the house drew their attention. Raised voices carried through the open doors. Sarah hesitated, then, clutching Ethan's hand, moved toward the sound. In the circular driveway, a group had gathered around Caldwell's Aston Martin. The owner himself stood with the car's hood open, his face flushed with anger. "What do you mean you can't fix it?" Caldwell demanded, glaring at a man in coveralls who had apparently been called to address an issue with the vehicle. "I paid $300,000 for this car." The mechanic shook his head. "I'd need to tow it to the shop, Mr. Caldwell. This isn't something I can fix here without proper equipment." "Unacceptable," Caldwell's voice cut through the evening air. "The party's just starting. I'm not having my car towed away like some common jalopy." Sarah tried to guide Ethan away, but the boy was transfixed by the scene. He strained to see past the adults, eyes locked on the exposed engine. "I bet it's just the connection to the fuel pump," he whispered, almost to himself. Or maybe the ignition relay. A woman in an evening gown overheard him and laughed. "Listen to the little expert," she said, loud enough for others to hear. The crowd parted slightly, and suddenly Caldwell's attention fixed on Sarah and Ethan, standing at the edge of the gathering. His eyes narrowed. "Mitchell," he said, recognizing his housekeeper. "What are you doing out here?" "And who is this?" Sarah stepped forward, her hand protectively on Ethan's shoulder. "I'm sorry, Mr. Caldwell. This is my son, Ethan. His after-school program ended early today. We were just heading to the staff area to wait until my shift ends." Caldwell's gaze shifted to Ethan, who was still staring at the car's engine with undisguised fascination. Something in the boy's expression, a mixture of curiosity and confidence, caught his attention. "Your son seems to have opinions about my car problem," Caldwell said, a mocking edge to his voice. The gathering of wealthy guests chuckled, amused by the notion. Before Sarah could stop him, Ethan spoke up. The way it sputtered before it died, and that clicking sound, it might be the ignition relay, or a loose connection to the fuel pump. A hush fell over the group. Caldwell's expression changed from irritation to something more calculating. He looked at the boy, then at his embarrassed mother, then back to the boy. Slowly a smile spread across his face, not kind but intrigued. "Is that so?" he said, stepping closer to Ethan. "And I suppose you know how to fix luxury cars too?" Ethan swallowed hard but didn't back down. "I've read about engines. I help Mr. Rodriguez sometimes at his garage." Sarah tugged at her son's arm. "Ethan, we should go." "No, wait." Caldwell held up a hand, his eyes never leaving Ethan's face. "I have a proposition." He turned to address the gathering, raising his voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, it seems we have a prodigy in our midst. The cleaning lady's son thinks he can fix what a professional mechanic couldn't." The crowd murmured, some laughing, others leaning in with interest. Sarah's face burned with embarrassment and anger. "Mr. Caldwell, please," she began, but he cut her off. "Let's make this interesting." Caldwell's voice carried across the driveway. "If your boy can get my car running in the next 30 minutes, I'll pay you." He paused dramatically. $1 million. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Sarah froze, certain she had misheard. "And if he can't," Caldwell continued, smiling coldly, "you both leave my employment. Tonight." The silence that followed was absolute. Every eye turned to Sarah and Ethan, standing isolated in a sea of wealth and privilege. The stakes had been set, the challenge issued. What began as a simple mechanical failure had transformed into a public spectacle of power and humiliation. Sarah looked down at her son, whose eyes had widened at the sum mentioned. Behind the fear, she saw something else: determination, the same quiet resolve she had relied on throughout her life as a single mother. In that moment, as the sun dipped below the horizon and cast long shadows across the Caldwell estate, neither mother nor son could have imagined how this challenge would change their lives. Forever. Vou continuar com o segundo capítulo. Type 1 text marked down Sarah's. Heart hammered against her ribs as the weight of Caldwell's challenge settled over the crowd. $1 million. The sum was so absurd, so beyond her comprehension, that it seemed to exist in another reality. And yet, the alternative, immediate unemployment, no references, no safety net for her and Ethan, was terrifyingly real. "Mr. Caldwell," she began, her voice steadier than she felt, "this isn't appropriate. My son is 9 years old. He's interested in engines, but he's not—" "Mom," Ethan tugged at her uniform sleeve. His voice was low, meant only for her ears. "I can try. I've watched Mr. Rodriguez fix harder problems." She looked down at her son, at his earnest face smudged with a pencil mark from school, at his two serious eyes that had seen more hardship than a child should. The responsible part of her wanted to refuse, to protect him from failure and humiliation. But there was something in his expression, a certainty, a quiet confidence that gave her pause. "You don't have to do this," she whispered back. Ethan glanced at the car, then at the gathering of wealthy onlookers, their faces a mix of amusement and curiosity. "I want to try," he said simply. Before Sarah could respond, Caldwell clapped his hands together. "Time's wasting," he announced, checking his Rolex. 29 minutes left. The professional mechanic, a man in his 50s with grease-stained coveralls, looked uncomfortably between Caldwell and the boy. "Sir, I don't think—" "You've had your chance," Caldwell dismissed him with a wave. "Let's see what the boy wonder can do." The mechanic hesitated, then shrugged and stepped back, joining the spectators. Sarah watched helplessly as Ethan approached the car, setting his backpack down carefully on the immaculate driveway. The Aston Martin gleamed under the garden lights that had automatically switched on as dusk deepened. $300,000 of engineering excellence, now at the mercy of her 9-year-old son's limited knowledge. Ethan stood on tiptoe to peer into the engine compartment. Unlike the familiar American cars he'd seen Mr. Rodriguez work on, this was a maze of unfamiliar components, arranged in elegant, compact configurations. For a moment, doubt crossed his face. "Need a step stool, kid?" someone called out, triggering laughter from the crowd. Sarah stepped forward, ready to end this charade, but Ethan's determined expression stopped her. He was pulling his school notebook from his backpack, flipping to a blank page. "Mom, can I borrow your phone? I need the flashlight," he asked quietly. She handed it over, and he directed the beam into the engine's depths. To the surprise of the onlookers, instead of immediately touching anything, Ethan began sketching rapid diagrams in his notebook, his pencil moving with surprising confidence. "What's he doing?" "Drawing a picture for his art class," Caldwell mocked, eliciting more laughter. Ethan ignored the comment, continuing to sketch and occasionally consult the engine. After about 2 minutes of this, he set the notebook aside and addressed the professional mechanic who had stepped back. "Sir, could I please borrow your tools? I promise I'll be careful." The mechanic glanced at Caldwell, who nodded with a smirk, clearly expecting entertainment from the boy's failure. With reluctance, the mechanic opened his toolbox and set it beside the car. 25 minutes, Caldwell announced. Ethan selected a flashlight from the toolbox and examined the engine more closely. His small hands moved with unexpected precision as he traced wiring connections and followed fuel lines. The crowd's mocking comments gradually quieted as they watched his methodical approach. "The ignition relay is here," he murmured, pointing to a component. "And it seems okay." He continued his inspection, occasionally consulting his hasty sketches. "The fuel pump connection should be—" "Yes, here." Sarah stood frozen, caught between maternal pride and terror. Even if by some miracle Ethan identified the problem, fixing a luxury sports car was surely beyond his capabilities. Yet she couldn't bring herself to stop him now, not when he was showing such focus and determination. 20 minutes, Caldwell called out, his voice carrying a hint of impatience now. The novelty was wearing off, and some guests were drifting back toward the party. Suddenly, Ethan straightened. "I think I found it," he said, pointing to a cluster of wires near the back of the engine compartment. "There's a loose connection here, and—" He leaned in closer. "One of the sensor wires looks damaged. It might have gotten pinched when the hood was closed." The professional mechanic, who had been watching with growing interest, stepped forward to look where Ethan was pointing. His eyebrows rose slightly. "The kid might be onto something," he admitted grudgingly. "That's the mass airflow sensor connection. If it's damaged or loose, it could definitely cause the car to stall." A ripple of surprise moved through the remaining spectators. Caldwell's smug expression faltered slightly. "Can I fix it?" Ethan asked the mechanic. The man hesitated, then nodded. "You'll need electrical tape for a temporary fix. Maybe some pliers to reshape the connector if it's bent." Ethan rummaged through the toolbox and found what he needed. His small hands were an advantage now, able to reach into the tight space where the problem lurked. Sarah watched, her throat tight with emotion, as her son carefully disconnected the damaged wire, examined it, and began to repair the connection. 15 minutes, Caldwell announced, but his tone had changed. There was less mockery now, more genuine curiosity. Working meticulously, Ethan wrapped the damaged section of wire with electrical tape, then used the pliers to gently reshape the bent connector. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he reconnected everything, double-checking his work. "I think that's it," he said finally, stepping back. "The connection should be secure now and the sensor should work properly." The mechanic leaned in to inspect Ethan's handiwork, nodding with grudging approval. "Not bad, kid. Not bad at all." "Well?" Caldwell demanded. "Will it work?" The mechanic shrugged. "Only one way to find out." All eyes turned to Ethan as he carefully closed the hood. Caldwell held out the key fob, his expression unreadable. 10 minutes to spare," he said. "Let's see if your repair job was worth $1 million. Ethan took the key with a trembling hand and climbed into the driver's seat. His feet barely reached the pedals, but that didn't matter for a simple ignition test. Sarah held her breath as her son pushed the start button. Nothing happened. The crowd began to murmur. Caldwell's smirk returned. "Well, it looks like..." The engine suddenly coughed, sputtered, and then roared to life with a powerful growl that echoed across the driveway. The Aston Martin's dashboard lit up, systems engaging one by one as the engine settled into a smooth, healthy purr. A stunned silence fell over the gathering, followed by scattered applause. Ethan sat behind the wheel, his face illuminated by the dashboard lights, an expression of pure amazement on his face. He had done it. Sarah covered her mouth with her hands, tears welling in her eyes. Pride, relief, and disbelief warred within her. The professional mechanic was shaking his head in astonishment. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered, loud enough for those nearby to hear. The kid fixed it. Ethan carefully switched off the engine and slid out of the car, looking up at Caldwell with a mixture of triumph and uncertainty. The wealthy man stood motionless, his expression inscrutable as he processed what had just happened. "Mr. Caldwell," Jennifer Wilson approached cautiously. "The mayor has arrived. He's asking for you." Caldwell didn't respond immediately. His eyes remained locked on Ethan, calculating. Then, slowly, a different kind of smile spread across his face. Not mocking now, but something more complex. "It seems," he said finally, addressing the remaining guests, "that we have a genuine prodigy in our midst." He turned to Sarah, who stood straight-backed despite her pounding heart. "Ms. Mitchell, I am a man of my word. $1 million as promised." A collective gasp went through the crowd. No one had actually expected him to follow through. "Jennifer," he called to his assistant, "have the legal department draw up the paperwork first thing tomorrow, and make sure there's a photographer present when I present the check." He turned back to Sarah with a businessman's smile. "This kind of human interest story is priceless publicity." Sarah felt dizzy, unable to fully process what was happening. "Mr. Caldwell, we can't possibly..." "Mom," Ethan whispered, tugging at her sleeve again. "We could fix the apartment, and you wouldn't have to work extra shifts anymore." The raw hope in his voice broke something inside her. How many times had she watched him go without things other children took for granted? How many nights had he fallen asleep to the sound of her counting coins at the kitchen table, trying to stretch their budget to cover next month's rent? Caldwell was watching this exchange with keen interest, already envisioning the headlines: "Auto Tycoon Rewards Child Genius with $1 million Prize." The story would be picked up by national news outlets. The publicity would be worth far more than the money. "I insist," he said smoothly. "Your son has earned it, and I never go back on a deal." Before Sarah could respond, a flash went off nearby. Mike Thompson, a reporter from the local newspaper who had been covering the charity gala, had captured the moment on his camera. "Mr. Caldwell," he called out, stepping forward, "can I get a statement about what just happened here?" Caldwell's smile widened. "Perfect." The story was already beginning to spread. "Certainly," he replied, placing one hand on Ethan's shoulder and extending the other towards Sarah. "I'd be happy to explain how this remarkable young man just earned his mother a $1 million payday," as camera flashes continued to pop and guests crowded around to witness the unfolding story. Sarah met her son's eyes. In them she saw not just triumph but a question. What would this sudden change mean for them? Neither could have predicted how this moment would transform their lives, setting in motion events that would test not just Ethan's mechanical aptitude, but the very foundations of their relationship. For in the shadow of the Caldwell mansion, under the watchful eyes of New York's elite, a new chapter was beginning. One where wealth and recognition would bring not just opportunities, but challenges neither mother nor son could possibly anticipate. Vou seguir com o terceiro capítulo. Teu text is marked down. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, but Sarah barely noticed the perfect autumn weather as she sat at her small kitchen table staring at her phone. The screen displayed a headline from the Westchester County Tribune. "Local boy wonder repairs billionaire's luxury car, earns $1 million reward." Beneath it was a photo of Ethan standing next to Caldwell, the Aston Martin gleaming in the background. The article had already been shared thousands of times. "Mom, we're famous!" Ethan exclaimed, peering over her shoulder at the screen. He was still in his pajamas, hair tousled from sleep, but his eyes were bright with excitement. "My teacher sent a message saying everyone's talking about it at school." Sarah set the phone down, trying to organize her thoughts. "Ethan, honey, sit down for a minute. We need to talk about what happens next." He slid into the chair across from her, reaching for the cereal box. Their apartment was small. Just 2 bedrooms in a weathered building in White Plains, 15 miles from Caldwell's Westchester estate. The furniture was second-hand, the appliances outdated, but Sarah had always kept it scrupulously clean. It was home, the only one Ethan had ever known. "Mr. Caldwell's assistant called this morning," she said carefully. "They want us to come to his office downtown at noon to sign paperwork and take photos for a press release." "Cool. Can I wear my blue shirt? The one without holes?" Ethan asked, pouring milk over his cereal. Sarah watched him, her heart aching with a mixture of love and concern. "Ethan, I need you to understand something. This money, if it really comes through, it doesn't change who we are. And it doesn't mean Mr. Caldwell is suddenly our friend." Ethan's spoon paused halfway to his mouth. "But he's giving us $1 million. "He's giving us $1 million because it makes him look good," Sarah corrected gently. "You saw all those reporters last night. This is publicity for him." "But I did fix his car," Ethan insisted. "That's why he's paying us, right? Because I earned it." Sarah reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Yes, you did. And I am so proud of you. What you did was amazing. But grown-up things are complicated sometimes." Her phone buzzed with another call, the third from a news outlet that morning. She ignored it. "Do we have to go?" Ethan asked, suddenly uncertain. Sarah considered the question seriously. They could refuse the money, maintain their privacy, continue their life as before. But the thought of Ethan's future, college opportunities she could never otherwise provide, made the decision clear. "Yes, we're going," she said finally. "But we're going to be smart about this. This money is for your future, Ethan, for education and opportunities. It's not for showing off or changing who we are." Ethan nodded solemnly, though Sarah wondered how much a 9-year-old could truly understand about the complexities that wealth would bring to their lives. At noon, they arrived at Caldwell Industries headquarters in downtown White Plains, a gleaming glass tower that dominated the skyline. Sarah had dressed carefully in her one good outfit, a navy blue pantsuit she'd bought second-hand for job interviews. Ethan wore his blue button-down shirt and khaki pants, his hair neatly combed. The receptionist, recognizing them immediately from the news, ushered them to the elevator with a mixture of curiosity and deference. "Mr. Caldwell is expecting you on the top floor," she said, swiping a security card. "Congratulations, by the way." The elevator whisked them upward, its mirrored walls reflecting their nervous expressions. Ethan fidgeted with his collar, suddenly aware of the gravity of the situation. "Remember," Sarah whispered as they approached the top floor, "we're just here to sign papers and take photos. We don't have to agree to anything else." The elevator doors opened directly into a vast executive suite with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson River Valley. Robert Caldwell stood near his desk, conversing with Jennifer Wilson and a man in an expensive suit whom Sarah didn't recognize. Several photographers and what appeared to be a television crew were setting up equipment near the windows. "Ah, the Mitchells," Caldwell exclaimed, turning with a broad smile. "Right on time. Come in, come in." Sarah guided Ethan forward with a protective hand on his shoulder. "Mr. Caldwell," she acknowledged with a polite nod. "Please call me Robert," he insisted, shaking her hand firmly before turning his attention to Ethan. "And here's our mechanical genius. How are you feeling about your newfound fame, young man?" Ethan glanced up at his mother before answering. "It's weird, sir. My friends keep texting me." Caldwell laughed appreciatively. "Well, get used to it. Your story is trending nationally. We've had calls from Good Morning America, CNN, you name it." He gestured to the man in the suit. "This is Harold Blackwell, my legal counsel. He's prepared all the necessary paperwork." Harold stepped forward, extending a leather portfolio. "Ms. Mitchell, we've drafted a straightforward agreement. $1 million, transferred directly to a trust fund for Ethan, with you as the trustee until he turns 18. The only stipulation is participation in today's press conference and acknowledgement of Mr. Caldwell's contribution in any media interviews regarding the incident." Sarah accepted the portfolio but didn't open it. "I'd like my own lawyer to review this before I sign anything." A flash of annoyance crossed Caldwell's face before his smile reasserted itself. Of course, though I assure you everything is standard." He checked his watch. "The press will be fully assembled in about 20 minutes. Perhaps in the meantime, Jennifer can show Ethan some of our design department. We have some prototype models I think he'd enjoy seeing." Before Sarah could object, Jennifer had already stepped forward, extending a hand to Ethan. "Would you like to see some cars that haven't even been built yet?" she asked with an artificial brightness. Ethan looked to his mother for permission. Despite her misgivings, Sarah nodded. "Stay within sight," she instructed, as Jennifer led him toward a glass-walled conference room where various scale models were displayed. Once Ethan was out of earshot, Caldwell's demeanor subtly shifted. "Ms. Mitchell," he said, lowering his voice, "I understand your caution, but let's be frank. This arrangement benefits us both significantly. You get financial security. I get a heartwarming story that enhances my company's image. Simple." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Nothing about this situation is simple, Mr. Caldwell. My son is 9 years old. He's not a publicity stunt. And yet here you are," Caldwell countered smoothly, "ready to accept my $1 million. For Ethan's future," Sarah clarified, her voice firm despite her discomfort. "Not for your PR campaign." Caldwell studied her for a moment, a new respect flickering in his eyes. "You know, when you worked in my house, I hardly noticed you. Just another uniform keeping things clean. I underestimated you, Ms. Mitchell." "Most people do," Sarah replied simply. Their conversation was interrupted as the elevator doors opened again, admitting a stream of reporters and camera operators. Among them was Mike Thompson, the local journalist who had captured the initial photos at the gala. He spotted Sarah and approached with an eager smile. "Ms. Mitchell." "Mike Thompson, Westchester Tribune. We spoke briefly last night. I'd love to get an exclusive on how this windfall will change your lives." Before Sarah could respond, Caldwell smoothly intercepted. "Mike, good to see you again. We'll be starting the formal press conference in just a few minutes. Plenty of time for questions then." As more media representatives filled the room, Sarah retreated to where Ethan was examining the car models with Jennifer. She noted how his fingers traced the aerodynamic curves of a futuristic sports car prototype, his expression one of complete absorption. "This one has a hybrid engine," he was explaining to Jennifer. "See how the airflow is channeled here? That's so cool." Jennifer looked genuinely impressed. "You really do know your cars, don't you?" Ethan shrugged. "I just read a lot. And Mr. Rodriguez at the garage lets me watch him work sometimes." Sarah touched his shoulder. "Ethan, they're about to start the press conference. Are you ready?" He looked up at her, suddenly nervous. "What do I have to say?" "Just be honest," Sarah advised. "You don't have to say anything you don't want to." Caldwell's voice cut through the room, calling them back. "Ladies and gentlemen of the press, thank you for coming today. I'm delighted to formally recognize an extraordinary young man who impressed us all with his remarkable talent last night." The next hour passed in a blur of camera flashes and questions. Caldwell presented an oversized check for $1 million, positioning Ethan and Sarah carefully for optimal photo opportunities. Sarah noticed how he kept one hand on Ethan's shoulder throughout, the gesture both proprietary and paternal. The reporters were particularly interested in Ethan's background and how he had developed his mechanical knowledge. He answered shyly at first, then with growing confidence as he described his visits to Rodriguez's garage and his library books on engines. "I just like understanding how things work," he explained, earning appreciative chuckles from the crowd. "And what will you do with the money?" one reporter asked. Before Ethan could answer, Sarah stepped in. "The funds will be held in trust for Ethan's education and future opportunities," she said firmly. "We're grateful for Mr. Caldwell's generosity, but our day-to-day life won't be changing dramatically." Caldwell raised an eyebrow at this, but didn't contradict her. Instead, he smoothly steered the conversation toward his company's commitment to nurturing young talent and announcing a new scholarship program inspired by Ethan's achievement. As the press conference wound down, Sarah noticed a man observing from the periphery who hadn't asked any questions. Unlike the other reporters, he wore no press badge and his attention seemed focused specifically on Ethan rather than Caldwell. When he caught Sarah watching him, he offered a brief professional smile before slipping out of the room. "Who was that man?" Sarah asked Jennifer quietly as the crowd began to disperse. Jennifer followed her gaze to the closing elevator doors. "Oh, that's Gregory Palmer. He's on the city council running for mayor next year. He probably came to associate himself with the good publicity." The name registered dimly in Sarah's memory. She'd seen his campaign posters around town. Politics had always seemed distant from her daily concerns of rent payments and school supplies, but something about Palmer's focused interest in Ethan left her uneasy. As the last reporters filed out, Caldwell approached them again, his public smile fading into something more calculating. "Well, that went exceptionally well. The trust fund paperwork will be finalized by the end of the week." He focused on Ethan. "Young man, you have a remarkable gift. Have you considered what you might want to do with it?" Ethan glanced at his mother before answering. "I just want to learn more about cars and engines. Maybe become an engineer someday." "An engineer," Caldwell repeated thoughtfully. "With your intuitive understanding of mechanics, you could be much more than that. You could revolutionize the industry." He turned to Sarah. "Ms. Mitchell, I'd like to offer Ethan a place in our company's Young Innovators program. Normally it's for high school students, but in his case we could make an exception." Sarah frowned. "What exactly would that involve?" "Mentorship, advanced learning opportunities, access to our research and development facilities," Caldwell explained. "All expenses paid, of course. He'd work with our top engineers several afternoons a week after school." Sarah felt Ethan tense with excitement beside her. Before she could formulate a response, Jennifer approached with a cordless phone. "Excuse me, Mr. Caldwell, but Mr. Takahashi from Tokyo is on the line. He says it's urgent regarding the merger." Caldwell's expression hardened momentarily before he composed himself. "I need to take this. Jennifer will give you the details about the Young Innovators program. Think it over, Ms. Mitchell." He shook Sarah's hand firmly, then Ethan's. "We'll be in touch soon." As Caldwell strode away, phone to his ear, Sarah and Ethan found themselves alone with Jennifer in the vast executive suite. The sudden quiet after the media frenzy was almost disorienting. "I've prepared an information packet," Jennifer said, handing Sarah a glossy folder. "The program is highly selective. Ethan would be the youngest participant ever admitted." Sarah accepted the folder without opening it. "Thank you. We'll review it at home." In the elevator descending to the lobby, Ethan could barely contain his excitement. "Mom, did you hear what he said? I could work with real engineers." "On real cars." Sarah squeezed his hand. "We'll talk about it, honey. But remember what I said this morning. We need to be careful about Mr. Caldwell's offers." As they crossed the lobby, Sarah noticed a familiar figure waiting near the entrance, Mike Thompson from the Westchester Tribune. He straightened when he saw them approaching with a friendly smile. "Ms. Mitchell, Ethan, do you have a moment? There's something important I'd like to discuss with you, away from Caldwell's people." Sarah hesitated, instinctively protective. "What about?" Thompson glanced around the busy lobby, then lowered his voice. About Robert Caldwell and what his interest in your son might really be about. There's more to this story than a billionaire's sudden generosity. Sarah studied the reporter's earnest expression, weighing her options. Behind his professional demeanor, she sensed genuine concern rather than mere journalistic ambition. Something in his eyes reminded her of her own caution. 5 minutes, she decided, checking her watch. We can talk in the cafe across the street. As they exited the gleaming tower, neither Sarah nor Ethan noticed Gregory Palmer, watching from a black SUV parked across the street. His expression thoughtful as he observed their interaction with the reporter. The wheels of ambition were already turning in the aspiring mayor's mind, wheels that would soon intersect, with their lives in ways none of them could. Predicte. Agora vou continuar com o quarto. Capítulo. Typed on text markdown. The cafe across from Caldwell Industries was crowded with office workers on their lunch breaks, providing a comfortable anonymity for Sarah, Ethan, and Mike Thompson. They found a corner table, and Sarah ordered hot chocolate for Ethan and coffee for herself and the reporter. I appreciate you taking the time, Thompson said, setting his recorder on the table. Mind if I record our conversation? For accuracy only, nothing goes to print without your approval. Sarah nodded cautiously. What exactly did you want to tell us about Mr. Caldwell? Thompson leaned forward, his voice low despite the ambient noise of the cafe. I've been covering Caldwell Industries for 5 years now. Robert Caldwell has a pattern of identifying talented people, bringing them into his orbit, and then taking credit for their innovations. What do you mean? Sarah asked, automatically placing a protective hand on Ethan's shoulder. 3 years ago, a graduate student named Andrew Mercer developed a revolutionary battery management system. Caldwell mentored him through a program similar to the one he's offering Ethan. 6 months later, Caldwell Industries patented the technology. Mercer's name appeared in small print as a contributor, but Caldwell took the spotlight, and most of the profits. Ethan looked confused. But that's stealing, isn't it? Thompson shook his head. Not legally. Mercer signed contracts giving Caldwell majority rights to anything developed during the mentorship. He didn't understand the fine print until it was too late. He slid a business card across the table. I'm not telling you to refuse Caldwell's offer, just get a good lawyer to review everything before you sign. And maybe talk to some of the former protégés first. Sarah pocketed the card, her expression thoughtful. Why are you telling us this? What's your angle? Thompson smiled wryly. Journalistic integrity? Or maybe I just don't like seeing history repeat itself. He sipped his coffee. Plus, I'm working on a larger investigative piece about how corporations appropriate innovations from young talents. Your story could be important, whether as another victim or as the exception who protected themselves. Before Sarah could respond, Ethan tugged at her sleeve. Mom, look, he whispered, pointing toward the cafe entrance. Gregory Palmer had just walked in, his campaign smile firmly in place as he approached their table. Ms. Mitchell, young Ethan. I thought that was you. What a pleasant coincidence. Sarah doubted it was a coincidence at all, but maintained a polite expression. Mr. Palmer, Jennifer Wilson mentioned you were at the press conference. I wouldn't have missed it, Palmer said, extending his hand first to Sarah, then to Ethan. The City Council is always interested in celebrating local success stories. May I join you? Before Sarah could formulate a diplomatic refusal, Palmer had already pulled up a chair. Thompson's expression had shifted to professional neutrality, though Sarah noticed him discreetly pressing the record button on his device again. Mike Thompson, Westchester Tribune, the reporter introduced himself. Ah, the paper that broke the story, Palmer acknowledged with a practiced politician's nod. Excellent work. Thank you, Thompson replied. I was just discussing with Miss Mitchell how sudden fame can bring unexpected challenges. Palmer turned his attention to Sarah, his expression solicitous. He's absolutely right, which is precisely why I wanted to speak with you. The community should be supporting Ethan's remarkable talent, not just exploiting it for publicity. Sarah raised an eyebrow. And how do you propose to support him, Mr. Palmer? Please call me Greg. His smile widened. I'm chairing a new initiative to expand STEM education in our public schools. Ethan's story is exactly the kind of inspiration we need. I'd like to invite him to be the face of our campaign, speaking at schools, appearing at fundraisers, showing other kids from modest backgrounds what's possible with determination and talent. Ethan perked up. I could talk to other kids about engines. Palmer nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. You'd be a role model, Ethan. Kids listen to other kids more than they listen to adults like me. Sarah noticed Thompson's skeptical expression and felt her own suspicions deepening. That's very flattering, Mr. Palmer, but Ethan's education is our priority right now, especially with all these sudden changes in our lives. Of course, Palmer backpedaled smoothly. The speaking engagements would be limited and scheduled around his school commitments. And naturally there would be compensation for your time. He produced a glossy brochure from his jacket. Our Future Innovators program is already funded through next year's budget. We'd be honored to have Ethan as our ambassador. Sarah accepted the brochure with a non-committal thank you, tucking it into her purse alongside Caldwell's information packet. Two powerful men suddenly interested in her son's future. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on her shoulders. We'll certainly consider it, she said diplomatically. But right now we need to process everything that's happened in the last 24 hours. Palmer nodded understandingly. Of course. Take all the time you need. He stood, straightening his tie. I should get back to City Hall. But please call my office any time. He handed Sarah another business card. And Ethan, keep up the amazing work. This city needs bright minds like yours. After Palmer left, Thompson let out a low whistle. Well, that was interesting timing. Looks like your son is becoming quite the valuable commodity, Miss Mitchell. Sarah sighed, suddenly exhausted. He's not a commodity. He's a 9-year-old boy who happened to fix a car. A 9-year-old boy who's now associated with a $1 million success story, Thompson corrected gently. In politics and business, that kind of narrative is gold. Ethan, who had been quietly sipping his hot chocolate, looked up at his mother with troubled eyes. Mom, is everyone just trying to use me? Sarah's heart clenched. In the excitement of the money and recognition, she hadn't considered how all this adult maneuvering might appear to her son. No, honey, she assured him, squeezing his hand. Some people genuinely want to support your talent. We just need to figure out who those people are. Thompson's expression softened as he watched their interaction. For what it's worth, he offered, I know someone who might be able to help you navigate all this. Lisa Parker. She's a family lawyer who specializes in cases involving gifted children. Lots of experience with entertainment industry kids, trust funds, that sort of thing. We're hardly entertainment industry, Sarah pointed out, but you are dealing with publicity, substantial money, and adults who want to profit from your son's abilities, Thompson countered. That's Lisa's wheelhouse, and she's one of the good ones, puts the kids' interests first. Sarah hesitated, then nodded. I'd appreciate that referral, thank you. As they prepared to leave, Thompson asked one final question. What will you do about your job at Caldwell's estate? Will you continue working there? The question caught Sarah off guard. In the whirlwind of events, she hadn't even considered her employment status. I don't know, she admitted. I should probably give notice, but we still need steady income until the trust fund is established. And you mentioned Mr. Rodriguez's garage, Thompson added, turning to Ethan. The local mechanic who lets you observe? Ethan nodded enthusiastically. Carlos Rodriguez. He has Rodriguez Auto Repair on Maple Street. He's been teaching me stuff since I was 7. He let me help change oil last summer. Thompson made a note in his phone. Might be worth talking to him as well. Sounds like he recognized your talent long before Caldwell did. Later that afternoon, Sarah and Ethan stood outside Rodriguez Auto Repair, a modest garage with a weathered sign and the comforting smells of motor oil and rubber. Carlos Rodriguez, a stocky man in his 50s with grease-stained hands and kind eyes, looked up from under the hood of a Chevrolet as they entered. Ethan! Sarah? His face split into a wide grin. The celebrities have arrived. I saw you both on the morning news. Ethan rushed forward, eager to share his experience. Mr. Rodriguez! I fixed an Aston Martin DB11. It had a damaged sensor wire and a loose connection to the mass airflow sensor. Rodriguez laughed, ruffling the boy's hair. So I heard. Using those troubleshooting steps I taught you, huh? Always check the connections first. Sarah watched their interaction with a growing sense of clarity. Here, among the tools and engines that had fascinated him for years, Ethan was simply himself, excited, curious, unburdened by the weight of adult expectations. Rodriguez had nurtured his interest without ulterior motives, sharing knowledge for the pure joy of seeing a young mind develop. "Carlos," she said as Ethan eagerly examined a dismantled transmission nearby, "I need your advice. Everyone suddenly wants a piece of Ethan's future. Caldwell, politicians, the media. I don't know how to protect him while still giving him opportunities." Rodriguez wiped his hands on a shop rag, his expression turning serious. "That boy has a gift, Sarah. I've seen a lot of mechanics come and go, but Ethan has something special, an intuition about machines, like they speak to him. He leaned against a workbench, but he's still a child. He needs time to play, to make mistakes, to learn without pressure." "That's exactly what I'm afraid he'll lose," Sarah admitted. "Caldwell wants him in some elite program. The politician wants him as the face of a campaign. That's all happening so fast." Rodriguez considered this for a moment. "You know, I've been thinking about expanding the shop, adding an educational component, teaching basic mechanics to kids from the community, especially girls and children from underprivileged backgrounds." He glanced at Ethan, who was completely absorbed in examining the transmission parts. Ethan could help, not as a poster child, but as a peer mentor, learning while teaching others. Sarah felt a spark of interest. That sounds more like what he needs. Something grounded, connected to the community. "The $1 million doesn't hurt either," Rodriguez added with a wink. "Maybe some of that could help get the program started. A proper classroom space. Tools sized for smaller hands." For the first time since the previous night's events, Sarah felt a genuine path forward taking shape in her mind. A way to use their sudden good fortune that aligned with their values, that could benefit others while nurturing Ethan's gift in a healthy environment. "Carlos, would you be willing to meet with a lawyer to discuss setting this up properly? Making it official?" Rodriguez looked surprised, then pleased. "You're serious? I've been dreaming about something like this for years, but never had the capital to start." "I'm serious," Sarah confirmed. "If we're going to do this, use this money, deal with all this attention, I want it to be on our terms, with people we trust." As they continued discussing possibilities, Sarah's phone rang. The screen displayed Jennifer Wilson's name, Caldwell's assistant, presumably calling to follow up on the Young Innovators program. Sarah silenced the call, then noticed a text message from an unknown number. "Ms. Mitchell, Gregory Palmer here. I've arranged for Ethan to be honored at next week's City Council meeting. Great publicity opportunity. Details to follow." Sarah showed the message to Rodriguez, who shook his head. "They're already circling, making plans without even consulting you." "Not anymore," Sarah said firmly, slipping the phone back into her pocket without responding. "From now on, we set the terms." As the afternoon sun slanted through the garage's dusty windows, casting long shadows across the concrete floor, Sarah watched Ethan animatedly discussing engine components with Rodriguez. For the first time since Caldwell had issued his challenge, she felt a sense of control returning. The path ahead was still uncertain, filled with potential pitfalls and powerful interests, but at least now they had the beginnings of a plan and allies they could trust. What she couldn't know was that across town, Robert Caldwell sat in his office reviewing a detailed report on the Mitchells, their finances, their connections, their vulnerabilities. The report had been prepared by a private investigator within hours of the press conference. Caldwell's interest in Ethan had evolved beyond a simple publicity stunt. He now saw potential that he was determined to harness, one way or another. And in his campaign office, Gregory Palmer was already approving mock-ups of posters featuring Ethan's image alongside his campaign slogan, "Building Tomorrow's Westchester Today." Whether Sarah had agreed or not, the machinery of politics was already incorporating her son into its narrative. The quiet afternoon in Rodriguez's garage represented a momentary calm, a chance to breathe and plan. But the forces set in motion by a single night's challenge were gathering momentum, drawing Sarah and Ethan toward a confrontation that would test not only their new resources but their deepest values and their bond as mother and son. Vou prosseguir com o quinto capítulo. Type to text markdown. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood in the middle of what had once been an abandoned storefront 2 blocks from Rodriguez Auto Repair. Sunlight streamed through freshly cleaned windows, illuminating a space transformed by purpose. One half of the large room had been set up as a classroom with workbenches, tool racks sized for smaller hands, and diagrams of engines on the walls. The other half contained actual vehicles in various states of repair, an old Volkswagen Beetle with its engine exposed, a lawnmower disassembled on a tarp, and a go-kart frame waiting to be built. "What do you think?" Lisa Parker asked, watching Sarah's expression carefully. The lawyer had become an invaluable ally in the whirlwind weeks since Ethan's moment of fame. With her guidance, Sarah had navigated the complicated trust fund paperwork, fended off Caldwell's increasingly persistent offers, and established the legal framework for what they were now calling the Mitchell-Rodriguez Community Workshop. "It's perfect," Sarah breathed, turning slowly to take in the space. "I can't believe we did all this in just 3 weeks." Lisa smiled, making notes on her ever-present tablet. "Amazing what you can accomplish with clear vision, the right resources, and a good lawyer." She winked at this last part. "The non-profit status is officially approved, by the way. Came through this morning. You're now the executive director of a legitimate educational foundation." Sarah shook her head in wonder. "Executive director? 3 weeks ago I was scrubbing toilets in Caldwell's mansion. And now you're telling him no to his face," Lisa observed with professional admiration. "Speaking of which, his legal team sent over yet another proposal this morning. They're up to a $2 million endowment for the Young Innovators program, with Ethan as the founding participant, plus a seat on the board for you." Sarah's expression hardened. "The answer's still no. I don't trust his sudden generosity." "Wise," Lisa agreed, especially after what Thompson's sources revealed about those previous protégés. The contracts basically turned those kids into Caldwell Industries' intellectual property. She glanced at her watch. "Speaking of Thompson, he's scheduled to interview you and Ethan here at 4. Exclusive feature on the workshop for Sunday's paper." Sarah nodded, making a mental note. Mike Thompson had proved to be another unexpected ally, using his journalistic platform to spotlight their community initiative rather than sensationalizing Ethan's story. His ongoing investigation into Caldwell's business practices had also provided valuable insights that reinforced Sarah's caution. The workshop door swung open, and Ethan burst in, followed by Carlos Rodriguez. Both wore identical grease-stained T-shirts with Mitchell-Rodriguez Workshop printed across the back. "Mom!" "We got all the tools unpacked and organized," Ethan exclaimed, his face flushed with excitement. "Mr. Rodriguez says we can start the first class this Saturday if the insurance paperwork is done." "It's done," Lisa confirmed, scrolling through her tablet. "Along with the liability waivers for participants and the instructor certifications. You're all set to open." Rodriguez looked around the space with undisguised pride. "From fixing one luxury car to creating opportunities for dozens of kids. Not a bad return on investment." The door chimed again and Jennifer Wilson entered, looking somewhat out of place in her designer suit. She carried a sleek leather portfolio and wore an expression of practiced pleasantness. "Ms. Mitchell," she greeted Sarah with professional courtesy. "Mr. Caldwell sent me to deliver his updated proposal in person. He feels there may have been some miscommunication in our previous discussions." Sarah exchanged glances with Lisa, who stepped forward. "Jennifer, I'm Lisa Parker, Ms. Mitchell's legal counsel. Any proposals should come through my office, as we've previously established." Jennifer's smile tightened slightly. Mr. Caldwell thought a more personal approach might be appropriate, given the relationship. "What relationship would that be?" Sarah asked coolly. "Former employer and housekeeper? Or someone who tried to publicly humiliate my son before realizing he could be useful for publicity?" Jennifer had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Mr. Caldwell recognizes that his initial approach was regrettable. He's genuinely impressed by Ethan's abilities and by what you're creating here." She gestured to the workshop. "This facility is admirable, but with Caldwell Industries' resources behind you, the impact could be exponentially greater." Lisa held out her hand for the portfolio. "We'll review the proposal and respond through official channels." Jennifer hesitated, then surrendered the documents. "Mr. Caldwell also wanted me to extend a dinner invitation. A private conversation, no press, no lawyers. Just a chance to clear the air and discuss possibilities without intermediaries." "No, thank you," Sarah said firmly. "Any discussions about Ethan's future or this workshop will include our legal counsel." Jennifer's professional mask slipped momentarily, revealing genuine frustration. He's not used to being refused, you know. Especially not by, she caught herself, by the cleaning lady. Sarah finished for her, one eyebrow raised. Jennifer had the decency to flush. That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant, Sarah countered, and exactly why my answer remains no. Please tell Mr. Caldwell that while we appreciate his interest, we're proceeding independently. After Jennifer left, Lisa let out a low whistle. I hope you realize you're probably the first person to stand up to Robert Caldwell in decades. Most people either cave to the money or get crushed by his lawyers. Well, we have a pretty good lawyer ourselves, Sarah pointed out with a small smile. And something Caldwell doesn't have. What's that? Ethan asked, having observed the exchange with interest. Sarah put an arm around his shoulders. Integrity, honey, and a genuine purpose beyond profit. The following Saturday morning, the Mitchell-Rodriguez Community Workshop officially opened its doors. 24 children from the surrounding neighborhoods, ranging in age from 8 to 15, filed in with expressions of curiosity and excitement. Many came from families that couldn't afford extracurricular activities. The workshop was free, with materials and tools provided through the trust fund. Sarah stood at the door greeting each child and their parents, while Rodriguez and Ethan prepared at the front of the room. The local newspaper had sent a photographer, and even a crew from a regional TV station was setting up in the corner. Mike Thompson's feature article had generated substantial interest. Just as the session was about to begin, a black SUV with tinted windows pulled up outside. Gregory Palmer emerged, accompanied by 2 aides and a cameraman. He straightened his tie and approached with his campaign smile firmly in place. "Ms. Mitchell, what a wonderful initiative," he exclaimed, extending his hand. "I've come to offer the City Council's official support and to present a proclamation honoring your contribution to youth education." Sarah shook his hand briefly but firmly. "Thank you, Mr. Palmer, but we're about to begin our first class. We weren't expecting official visitors today." Palmer's smile didn't waver. "This will only take a moment. The proclamation includes a pledge of city funding for programs like yours. Excellent publicity for everyone involved." He gestured to his cameraman. "We'll just capture a few shots of me presenting the document to you and Ethan. Perhaps a brief statement from each of you about the importance of community investment in education." "Mr. Palmer," Sarah interrupted, stepping outside and closing the door behind her to keep the conversation private. "While we appreciate the recognition, we've been very clear about keeping Ethan out of political contexts. If you'd like to support the workshop, you're welcome to make a donation like any other community member." Palmer's pleasant expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "Ms. Mitchell, I'm offering you significant political capital and financial support. Most community organizations would be grateful for this level of attention." "We're not most organizations," Sarah replied evenly. "Our focus is on the children and their learning experience, not on campaign opportunities." Palmer studied her for a moment, his political calculation almost visible behind his eyes. "You know, I had a very interesting conversation with Robert Caldwell yesterday. He mentioned you've been equally resistant to his offers of support." Sarah maintained her composure, though internally she noted the concerning implication that Caldwell and Palmer were now communicating about her and Ethan. "Mr. Palmer, our first class is waiting to begin. If you'd like to discuss potential city support for the workshop, please contact our foundation office to schedule a proper meeting." With that, she turned and re-entered the workshop, leaving the politician standing on the sidewalk. Through the window, she saw him confer briefly with his aides before returning to the SUV, his expression calculating rather than defeated. Inside, the children were gathered around Ethan and Rodriguez, who had disassembled a small engine on the central workbench. Ethan was explaining each component with surprising clarity for a 9-year-old, his natural enthusiasm drawing the other children in. "This is the spark plug," he was saying, holding up the part for all to see. "It creates a tiny lightning bolt inside the engine that makes the fuel explode, but in a controlled way that pushes the piston down, which makes the car move." A girl about Ethan's age raised her hand. "But what if the lightning bolt doesn't happen? Is that why sometimes cars won't start?" Ethan nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. That could be one reason. Or maybe the fuel isn't reaching the engine, or the battery doesn't have enough power to create the spark. Diagnosing problems means figuring out which part of the whole system isn't working right. Sarah felt a surge of pride watching her son in this element, teaching rather than being used, sharing knowledge rather than being exploited for his abilities. This was what the money had made possible, a space where Ethan's gift could flourish without the pressure of adult ambitions. The first session was a resounding success. By the end, each child had disassembled and reassembled a small engine component, guided by Ethan, Rodriguez, and 2 volunteer instructors from the local community college. Parents arriving for pickup found their children animated and grease-stained, eagerly explaining what they'd learned. As the last families departed, Mike Thompson approached Sarah, notepad in hand. "That was impressive," he said sincerely. "Those kids were completely engaged. Especially that girl in the red t-shirt. She barely blinked the whole 2 hours." "That's Maya," Sarah said, smiling at the memory of the girl's intense concentration. "She's from the apartment building next to ours. Her mother works 3 jobs. There's not much money for activities like this." Thompson made a note. "And that's really the story here, isn't it? Not just Ethan's talent, but how you've channeled this unexpected windfall into something that benefits the whole community." He glanced toward the window. "I saw Palmer make an appearance. And leave rather quickly," Sarah sighed. "He wanted a photo op and a campaign moment. We declined." "Brave move," Thompson observed. "Palmer has significant influence on local funding and permits. And from what I hear, he doesn't take rejection well, especially not when it might benefit his campaign." "We'll manage," Sarah said with more confidence than she felt. "The foundation is established. We have sufficient funding from the trust and the community support has been overwhelming." Thompson nodded thoughtfully. "Speaking of community support, I did some digging on Carlos Rodriguez. Did you know he was once one of Caldwell's top engineers? Left the company about 15 years ago under somewhat mysterious circumstances. Never worked in the corporate sector again." Sarah turned to look at Rodriguez, who was helping Ethan clean up the workbenches. "He never mentioned that." "Might be worth asking about," Thompson suggested, "especially given Caldwell's persistent interest in your project. There could be history there that's relevant to your situation." After Thompson left, Sarah approached Rodriguez as he was locking up the tool cabinet. "Carlos," she began carefully, "why didn't you tell me you used to work for Caldwell Industries?" Rodriguez froze momentarily, then continued turning the key in the lock. "It was a long time ago," he said without turning around. "Not relevant to what we're doing here." "I think it might be," Sarah pressed gently. "Caldwell's unusual interest in Ethan, his persistence even after multiple rejections. Is there something I should know about your history with him?" Rodriguez sighed heavily, his shoulders slumping slightly. He glanced at Ethan, who was across the room organizing a bookshelf out of earshot. "It's not a pleasant story, Sarah. But you're right, you should know." He gestured to a pair of chairs in the corner. "It might help explain why I was so eager to help you establish this workshop as an independent entity." As they sat, Rodriguez rubbed his calloused hands together, gathering his thoughts. 20 years ago, I was one of Caldwell's rising star engineers. Had several patents to my name, was leading the development of a revolutionary hybrid engine system before such things were mainstream. "What happened?" Sarah asked when he paused. "Robert Caldwell happened," Rodriguez said, his voice hardening. "The technology we were developing, my team and I, would have significantly reduced emissions while improving fuel efficiency, but implementing it would have required retooling entire production lines, a substantial upfront investment, before profits could be realized." Sarah began to see where the story was heading. "He shelved it? For financial reasons?" Rodriguez's laugh was bitter. "Worse, he sold the patents to an oil company subsidiary, which buried the technology entirely. When I protested, tried to take the research public, I found myself facing not only termination but a lawsuit for violating confidentiality agreements. They took everything, my career, my savings, nearly my home." "That's horrible," Sarah murmured, the pieces falling into place. "And that's why you opened the garage? To keep working on engines in your own way?" Rodriguez nodded, small-scale independent. "Teaching people to maintain and extend the life of their vehicles rather than feeding the constant consumption machine." He looked across the room at Ethan. "When I first met your son, saw how he understood machines intuitively. It reminded me of myself at that age. I wanted to nurture that gift in a way that couldn't be corrupted. Sarah reached out and squeezed his arm gratefully. Thank you for telling me, and for everything you've done for Ethan. It makes Caldwell's interest all the more concerning. Caldwell doesn't see a child with a gift, Rodriguez said gravely. He sees potential profit, future patents, corporate advantage, and he's not accustomed to being denied what he wants. As if on cue, Sarah's phone chimed with a text message. It was from an unknown number, but the content made the sender's identity clear. Ms. Mitchell, your workshop initiative is admirable but limited. My offer remains open, with additional incentives now included. The city's permitting office can be challenging to navigate without the right connections. I could help ensure your path remains smooth. Let's discuss. R.C. Sarah showed the message to Rodriguez, whose expression darkened. A threat wrapped in an offer, he observed. Classic Caldwell. Across the room, Ethan had finished organizing the bookshelf and was now examining the go-kart frame, oblivious to the adult's serious conversation. His expression was one of pure joy and curiosity. Exactly what childhood should be, Sarah thought. We'll need to be even more careful going forward, she said quietly. It seems Caldwell and Palmer may be aligning their interests against ours. Rodriguez nodded grimly. The workshop is a direct challenge to Caldwell's narrative, proving that Ethan's talent can flourish without corporate control, and it gives Palmer no political leverage. Neither of them will accept that easily. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows through the workshop windows, Sarah watched her son, still just a boy, despite his remarkable abilities, and felt the weight of protection settle more heavily on her shoulders. They had created something meaningful here, something true to their values. But powerful interests were circling, and the real challenge was just beginning. What she couldn't know was that at that very moment, in the penthouse office of Caldwell Industries, Robert Caldwell was reviewing a comprehensive strategy document titled Mitchell, Acquisition Plan, the battle for Ethan's future, and for the principle of independence against corporate and political control, was about to escalate in ways Sarah couldn't yet imagine. Continuarei com o sexto capítulo. Title chapters. Type text Chuck's markdown. The Mitchell-Rodriguez Community Workshop flourished. Over the next 2 months, expanding from 1 weekly session to 5, with different age groups and specialized focuses. A waiting list formed as word spread through the community. Local businesses began donating materials and equipment, and several retired mechanics volunteered as instructors. Ethan thrived in his role as junior instructor, his confidence growing as he shared his knowledge with peers. For the first time in his life, he had found a place where his unusual gift was not only accepted but celebrated, not for publicity or profit, but for its own inherent value. Sarah divided her time between managing the workshop's operations and pursuing her own education. With Lisa Parker's encouragement, she had enrolled in business management courses at the local community college, determined to acquire the skills necessary to sustain their initiative long-term. Life had settled into a new normal, challenging, but deeply fulfilling, when the first warning signs appeared. It began with a letter from the city's building inspection department, citing anonymous complaints about code violations at the workshop. The inspector who arrived the next day seemed apologetic, as he listed minor issues that suddenly required immediate attention: additional fire exits, updated electrical systems, accessibility ramps that hadn't been mentioned during the initial permit process. Politics, Rodriguez muttered after the inspector left, handing the citation to Sarah. Palmer's fingerprints are all over this, Sarah nodded grimly. And the timing isn't coincidental. The Westchester Tribune is running Thompson's feature on our 3-month success this Sunday. The workshop remained open while they addressed the citations, but this was only the beginning. The following week, their insurance company notified them of a substantial premium increase, citing elevated risk factors in youth mechanical education programs. Days later, their application for an educational grant was denied without explanation. Despite meeting all qualifications, they're trying to drain us financially, Lisa observed during an emergency strategy session in her office. Force you to seek outside funding, which Caldwell would conveniently provide, with strings attached, of course. Sarah rubbed her temples, fighting a growing headache. The trust fund can cover these expenses for now, but if this pattern continues, it will, Lisa said bluntly. Men like Caldwell and Palmer don't accept defeat easily. They'll keep applying pressure until you capitulate or collapse. So what do we do? Sarah asked. Lisa smiled thinly. We fight back publicly. She tapped her tablet, bringing up an email. Thompson has been gathering information for months on Caldwell's pattern of appropriating innovations and Palmer's questionable zoning decisions. He's ready to publish a comprehensive expose, but he needs on-the-record statements from you and other affected parties. Sarah hesitated. Going public would mean even more attention on Ethan. True, Lisa acknowledged, but remaining silent allows them to operate in the shadows. Sometimes the only effective disinfectant is sunlight. That evening, Sarah sat on the edge of Ethan's bed, watching as he thumbed through a technical manual on electric vehicle systems, his current fascination. Their apartment, though still modest, had seen some thoughtful improvements. New furniture, better lighting, bookshelves filled with the educational materials Ethan had previously been able to access only through the public library. Small comforts, not extravagance. "Honey, we need to talk about something important," she began, choosing her words carefully. "Mr. Thompson, the reporter who's been covering the workshop, he's working on a bigger story about Mr. Caldwell and Mr. Palmer, and he's asked if we would share our experiences." Ethan set his book aside, his expression serious beyond his years. "Are they the ones causing all the problems at the workshop?" Sarah sometimes forgot how perceptive her son was. "We think so, yes. How did you know there were problems?" Ethan shrugged. "I heard you and Mr. Rodriguez talking, and I saw the inspector guy writing things down and making you look worried." He fiddled with the corner of his blanket. "Is the workshop going to close?" "Not if I can help it," Sarah assured him firmly. "But Mr. Thompson thinks that talking publicly about what's happening might help stop the interference. The thing is, it would mean more attention on you. Articles, maybe TV interviews." Ethan considered this thoughtfully. Would it help the other kids keep coming to the workshop? Like Maya. "She told me she's building a motor for her science fair project now." Sarah's heart swelled with pride at his concern for others. "It might, yes." "Then I'll do it," he said simply. "I'm not scared of Mr. Caldwell or Mr. Palmer." Sarah brushed his hair back from his forehead. "You're a brave kid, you know that? But I need you to understand something important. If we do this, speak out publicly. It might get worse before it gets better. Powerful people don't like being challenged. Like when you stood up to Mr. Caldwell at his party," Ethan asked. "When everyone was laughing but you didn't back down?" The memory of that night, the wealthy guests' mocking laughter, the cruel bet, Ethan's determined face, remained vivid. "Yes, exactly like that. Sometimes standing up for what's right isn't easy." Ethan nodded solemnly. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Anything, honey. Why does Mr. Caldwell want me so badly?" "I'm just a kid who likes engines." Sarah chose her words carefully. "You're special, Ethan. You understand things that most adults never grasp. People like Mr. Caldwell, they see special talents as something to possess, to control, to profit from. But that's not what gifts are for. They're meant to be shared, to help others, to make the world better. Like we're doing at the workshop?" Exactly like that. The following day, Sarah agreed to Thompson's proposal. What began as a simple interview expanded into hours of detailed documentation, not just their experiences, but connecting them to a larger pattern of behavior by both Caldwell and Palmer. Rodriguez contributed his own history, and Lisa helped track down other former Caldwell protégés who were willing to speak on record about how their innovations had been appropriated. The resulting exposé, published as a 3-part series in the Westchester Tribune, sent shockwaves through the community. "Innovation Predators: How Corporate and Political Interests Exploit Young Talent" ran as the headline, accompanied by a powerful photo of Ethan working alongside other children at the workshop. The first installment detailed Caldwell's history of identifying talented individuals, bringing them under his corporate umbrella, and then claiming ownership of their innovations. Rodriguez's story featured prominently, along with 3 other former employees who described similar experiences. Documents obtained by Thompson revealed a systematic approach to what the article termed talent harvesting, complete with legal frameworks designed to transfer intellectual property rights while providing minimal compensation to the actual inventors. The second installment focused on Palmer's political maneuvers, including selective enforcement of regulations against businesses that refused his assistance and preferential treatment for campaign donors. The building inspector who had cited the workshop was quoted anonymously, confirming that the sudden scrutiny had been politically motivated. The final installment presented the Mitchell-Rodriguez workshop as an alternative model, one that nurtured talent for community benefit rather than private profit. It ended with a powerful statement from Sarah. "When my son fixed that luxury car, he didn't do it for money or fame. He did it because he understood how things work and wanted to help. That's the spirit we're preserving at our workshop, helping children understand how things work so they can fix what's broken in machines and maybe someday in systems. Some people see that as threatening. We see it as necessary." The public response was immediate and overwhelmingly supportive. Workshop attendance swelled, volunteers stepped forward, and donations poured in from community members and small businesses. Thompson's articles were picked up by national outlets, transforming a local conflict into a broader conversation about corporate ethics and the exploitation of talent. Caldwell. Industries issued a terse statement denying all allegations and threatening legal action for defamation. Palmer's office was more verbose, claiming the articles represented politically motivated attacks against a public servant with an unblemished record of community support. But the damage to their reputations was done. Other local businesses came forward with their own stories of regulatory harassment after refusing Palmer's partnership offers. Former Caldwell employees began sharing experiences that corroborated the pattern described in the exposé. For a brief, heady moment, it seemed they had won. The workshop continued operations without further regulatory interference. Palmer became conspicuously absent from public events involving the initiative, and Caldwell's persistent offers ceased. Then, exactly 1 week after the final installment was published, Sarah received a hand-delivered envelope. Inside was a formal notice of legal action. Robert Caldwell was suing her, Rodriguez, the Workshop Foundation, and the Westchester Tribune for defamation, seeking damages of $20 million. The summons was followed by a personal note in elegant handwriting. "You could have been an ally. Now you'll serve as an example." R.C. Lisa Parker's face was grim as she reviewed the legal documents in her office later that day. "This isn't about winning a lawsuit," she explained to a shaken Sarah. "It's about draining your resources and sending a message. Even with the trust fund, you can't match Caldwell's legal war chest." "So we just surrender?" Sarah asked, her voice tight with frustration. "Let him intimidate us into silence?" "No," Lisa said firmly. "We fight smart. I'm already assembling a team of attorneys willing to work pro bono. The ACLU is interested in the free speech implications. Ann Thompson's editor is standing firmly behind the reporting. The Tribune's parent company has deep pockets and good lawyers." Rodriguez, who had been silently listening, finally spoke. "This was always the risk, Sarah. Caldwell doesn't just want to win. He wants to crush any challenge to his power. I've seen it before." "But why?" Sarah demanded. "Why go to these lengths over a 9-year-old boy and a community workshop?" "Because you refuse to be bought," Rodriguez said simply. "In Caldwell's world, everything and everyone has a price. When you rejected his money, his influence, his vision for Ethan's future, you challenged his most fundamental belief system." Later that night, after assurances from Lisa about their legal strategy, Sarah returned to the apartment to find Ethan waiting up for her, despite the late hour. His face was solemn in the dim light of the reading lamp. "Are we in trouble, Mom?" he asked directly. Sarah considered sugarcoating the truth, then thought better of it. Ethan had earned her honesty. "Yes," she admitted, sitting beside him on the couch. "Mr. Caldwell is suing us, claiming we said untrue things about him in Mr. Thompson's articles." "But we didn't," Ethan protested. "Everything in those stories really happened." "I know, honey, and we'll prove that. But it might take a long time and it won't be easy." Ethan was quiet for a moment, processing this. Then he asked, "Is it my fault because I fixed his car?" Sarah's heart clenched. "No," she said firmly, taking his hands in hers. "Never think that. You did something extraordinary that night. something good and true to who you are. What's happening now is about Mr. Caldwell's choices, not yours. But if I hadn't fixed the car, none of this would be happening, Ethan persisted, his logical mind following the chain of causality. And if I hadn't taken you to work that day, or if his car hadn't broken down, Sarah countered gently. We can't live our lives fearing the unexpected consequences of doing the right thing. Ethan considered this, then nodded slowly. So what do we do now? We keep going, Sarah said, surprised by the conviction in her own voice. We keep the workshop open. We keep teaching children. We keep being exactly who we are. A small smile tugged at Ethan's lips. Like that sign Mr. Rodriguez put up in the workshop. Fix what's broken, build what's needed. Exactly like that, Sarah agreed, pulling him into a hug. What she didn't tell Ethan was that earlier that evening, she had received another message, this one from Gregory Palmer's office. The politician was distancing himself from Caldwell's lawsuit and offering to mediate the conflict. His assistance would come at a price, of course, a prominent role in the workshop's governance, and Ethan's participation in several upcoming campaign events. It was a calculated political maneuver, positioning Palmer as the reasonable middle ground between Caldwell's aggression and Sarah's stubborn independence. The offer carried an unspoken threat: side with Palmer, or face both Caldwell's legal assault and renewed regulatory challenges. As Ethan finally drifted off to sleep, Sarah sat at the kitchen table, reviewing their options with clear-eyed determination. The path forward was treacherous, caught between corporate power and political ambition. But surrender would mean betraying everything they had built, not just for themselves, but for the children who now filled the workshop with their curiosity and dreams. Tomorrow, she would meet with Lisa, Rodriguez, and Thompson to formulate their response. For tonight, watching her son sleep peacefully despite the gathering storm, Sarah allowed herself a moment of quiet resolve. They had come too far to back down now. Whatever Caldwell and Palmer threw at them next, they would face it together, not just as mother and son, but as the center of a community that was now standing with them. What Sarah couldn't know was that across town, an unexpected conversation was taking place, one that would dramatically alter the landscape of their conflict and offer a new path forward when they needed it. Mosturbe. Vou prosseguir com o 7º capítulo. Type or text markdown. The legal battle dominated. The next month of Sarah and Ethan's lives. Each day brought new developments. Motions filed, counter-motions, depositions scheduled and rescheduled. Caldwell's legal team operated with ruthless efficiency, seeking to overwhelm them with paperwork and procedural complexities. Lisa Parker proved invaluable, coordinating the pro bono legal team and shielding Sarah from the most stressful aspects of the process. But the toll was still evident, in Sarah's tired eyes each morning, in the subdued atmosphere that had replaced the workshop's initial energy. The most difficult part was watching Ethan's carefree enthusiasm gradually give way to a wariness beyond his years. Though Sarah tried to maintain normalcy, he absorbed the tension around him like a sponge. He began checking the locks on their apartment door each night, startling at unexpected sounds, asking questions about what would happen if they lost the lawsuit. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, Sarah arrived at the workshop to find an unfamiliar woman waiting outside. Elegantly dressed in a tailored suit, with silver-streaked dark hair and sharp, intelligent eyes, she straightened as Sarah approached. "Miss Mitchell, I'm Eleanor Caldwell, Robert's ex-wife." Sarah froze, instinctively scanning for security or legal representatives, but Eleanor appeared to be alone. "Mrs. Caldwell," she acknowledged cautiously. "If you're here on behalf of your ex-husband—" "Please," Eleanor interrupted, her expression pained. "Nothing could be further from the truth. I've been divorced from Robert for 15 years, and we are not on friendly terms." She glanced at the workshop sign, then back to Sarah. "I'd like to speak with you privately, if possible, about Ethan and about Robert's lawsuit." Sarah hesitated, then unlocked the door. "I have 20 minutes before students arrive." Inside, Eleanor moved through the space with measured steps, taking in the workbenches, the tools sized for smaller hands, the educational diagrams on the walls. "This is impressive," she said with what seemed like genuine admiration. "Very different from Robert's corporate approach to education. Why are you here, Mrs. Caldwell?" Sarah asked directly, remaining near the door. Eleanor turned to face her. Because I recognize the pattern. Robert's obsession with your son. The escalating pressure, the lawsuit when you refuse to comply, I've seen it before. She paused, choosing her words carefully. I was once married to Robert's ambition, Ms. Mitchell. I watched it consume everything in its path, including our own son. Sarah's wariness gave way to surprise. I didn't know Caldwell had a son. Few people do, Eleanor said with a sad smile. James lives in Europe now, as far from his father's influence as possible. He was 12 when he designed an innovative battery management system for one of Robert's early electric vehicle prototypes. When Robert tried to claim full credit and control over James's future development, I finally found the courage to leave. The divorce was contentious. Sarah gestured to the chairs in the small office area. Please sit. I think I need to hear this. As they settled, Eleanor continued. Robert views exceptional talent as a resource to be acquired and controlled, whether it appears in his own son or in a stranger's child. When James refused to become the prodigy on display that Robert wanted, he was gradually written out of the Caldwell narrative. Our custody agreement gave Robert weekend visitation, but those visits became increasingly rare as James proved disappointing to his father's ambitions. I'm sorry, Sarah said, genuinely moved by the pain evident in Eleanor's voice. But I still don't understand why you're here now. Because history is repeating itself, and I can't stand by and watch another child caught in Robert's games. Eleanor reached into her handbag and withdrew a flash drive. This contains evidence that may help your legal defense. Internal Caldwell Industries documents about the talent acquisition program, so the communications regarding your son specifically, and Robert's own emails directing the regulatory harassment of your workshop. Sarah stared at the drive, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. Why would you do this? He's still your son's father. Precisely, Eleanor said firmly, and I've watched for 15 years as he's failed in that most basic role. James is an exceptional young man despite Robert, not because of him. She placed the drive on the table between them. I'm not doing this out of vengeance. Ms. Mitchell, I'm doing it because I know exactly what Robert is capable of when he sets his sights on a child with special talents. Sarah picked up the flash drive, turning it over in her palm. This could change everything. It will, Eleanor confirmed. Robert's legal strategy depends on overwhelming you with costs and complexity until you surrender. These documents expose the true nature of his campaign against you, not as a legitimate defamation claim, but as a calculated effort to gain control over your son's future. Why now? Sarah asked. The lawsuit has been ongoing for weeks. Eleanor's expression hardened slightly. Because I just learned that Robert has initiated private discussions with family court officials about your fitness as Ethan's mother, given the financial pressure and negative publicity the lawsuit has created. He's laying groundwork to question your custody if all else fails. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. He would, Eleanor cut in gravely. He's done it before. Our custody battle was brutal, and he had far less interest in James than he appears to have in your son. She leaned forward, her voice intense. Ms. Mitchell, you need to understand. Robert doesn't see boundaries when it comes to acquiring what he wants. Not legal, not ethical, certainly not emotional. If he can't buy Ethan's talent, he'll find another way to control it. After Eleanor left, Sarah sat motionless in the quiet workshop, the flash drive heavy in her hand. The thought of Caldwell attempting to challenge her custody of Ethan made her physically ill. She had always believed that their greatest vulnerability was financial, that Caldwell could outlast them in a war of legal attrition. The possibility that he might target their relationship directly hadn't occurred to her. She called Lisa immediately, describing the unexpected visit and the potential evidence. The lawyer's response was cautiously optimistic, but professional. If these documents are authentic, they could completely change the trajectory of the case, Lisa acknowledged. But we need to verify everything before proceeding. And Sarah, if there's any substance to Eleanor's warning about custody challenges, we need to prepare for that front as well. By the time Ethan and Rodriguez arrived to prepare for the afternoon session, Sarah had composed herself outwardly, while her mind raced with implications and contingencies. Watching her son demonstrate a simple circuit to a group of eager children, She felt a renewed determination. Whatever it took, she would protect him, not just from Caldwell's legal maneuvers, but from the psychological burden of being at the center of this adult conflict. That evening, as Lisa's team began the painstaking process of authenticating Eleanor's documents, Sarah made a decision. She needed to create space for Ethan away from the constant pressure, a chance for him to simply be a child again, even briefly. "How would you feel about a little road trip this weekend?" she asked as they prepared dinner together. "Just you and me, maybe drive up to the mountains. The fall colors should be amazing right now." Ethan looked up from chopping vegetables, surprise giving way to excitement. "Really? But what about the workshop? And all the lawyer meetings?" "The workshop can manage without us for 2 days," Sarah said firmly. "And the legal stuff will still be there when we get back. I think we both need a break, time to remember what's actually important." Ethan's smile, the first genuine, uncomplicated one she'd seen in weeks, confirmed she'd made the right decision. "Can we bring my telescope? There's supposed to be a meteor shower Saturday night. And the mountains would have less light pollution than here." "Absolutely," Sarah agreed, realizing how long it had been since Ethan had mentioned astronomy. His secondary passion after engines, but one that had been overshadowed by recent events. That weekend provided a crucial respite. They rented a small cabin near Bear Mountain State Park, hiked during the day among the blazing autumn foliage, and stayed up late watching meteors streak across the clear night sky. For hours at a time, Sarah managed to forget about lawsuits and custody threats and political maneuvering, focusing instead on Ethan's excited commentary about stellar phenomena and his plans for building a model rocket with his workshop students. It was during their final morning at the cabin, as Sarah prepared breakfast while Ethan sketched designs for his rocket project, that her phone rang with Lisa's distinctive ringtone. "We've verified the documents," Lisa announced without preamble. "They're authentic, Sarah. Internal emails, meeting minutes, strategy memos. Eleanor Caldwell delivered exactly what she promised." Sarah stepped onto the cabin's small porch to continue the conversation privately. "And the custody concerns? Was she right about that too?" Lisa's hesitation was answer enough. "There are emails between Caldwell and his legal team discussing contingency approaches if the lawsuit fails to achieve the desired outcome. They specifically mention custody evaluation as a potential point of leverage. It's all very carefully worded, but the intent is clear." Sarah gripped the porch railing, watching through the window as Ethan worked on his designs, blissfully unaware of the schemes surrounding him. "So what happens now?" "We counterfile immediately," Lisa said, her tone shifting from concern to strategic. "These documents transform the narrative completely. Instead of defending against defamation, we go on the offensive. Malicious prosecution, corporate harassment, abuse of legal process. And we leak specific elements to Thompson at the Tribune. Public opinion is already on your side. This will cement it. And the custody threat? We preempt it," Lisa said firmly. "File for a restraining order based on the documented pattern of harassment. Make it clear that any custody challenge would be seen by the court as an extension of that pattern. With these documents as evidence, no family court judge would entertain Caldwell's claims." When Sarah and Ethan returned to White Plains Sunday evening, the legal landscape had already begun to shift. Lisa's team had worked through the weekend, filing motions and preparing statements. Thompson had published a front-page story in the Sunday edition of the Tribune. Leaked documents reveal Caldwell's campaign against child prodigy and mother. By Monday morning, Caldwell Industries' stock had dropped 7 points. The company's PR team issued a statement claiming the documents were fabricated and suggesting a disgruntled former employee might be responsible. There was no mention of Eleanor. Sarah kept Ethan home from school, anticipating media attention. Sure enough, reporters gathered outside their apartment building and at the workshop. Rodriguez called to report that Caldwell's legal team had abruptly requested a settlement conference. "They're scrambling," Lisa confirmed when Sarah relayed the information. "The documents expose not just the campaign against you, but potentially illegal corporate practices affecting shareholders. Caldwell's board of directors is likely demanding damage control." The settlement offer, when it came, was surprisingly comprehensive. Full dismissal of all legal claims, a public apology for the misunderstanding, a substantial donation to the Workshop Foundation with no strings attached, and a legally binding agreement to cease all interference, direct or indirect, in Ethan's education and development. "They're desperate to make this go away quickly," Lisa observed as they reviewed the terms in her office, "before more documents can emerge or shareholders file their own suits." "Should we accept?" Sarah asked, still wary of anything coming from Caldwell. "From a legal standpoint, it's a complete victory," Lisa acknowledged. "But the decision isn't just legal, is it? It's about whether you believe Caldwell will honor these commitments once the immediate crisis passes." Sarah considered this carefully. "What about adding a provision? Regular auditing of their compliance by an independent entity, with significant financial penalties for any violations?" Lisa smiled approvingly. "Excellent. I'll have that drafted immediately. And perhaps a confidentiality exception, allowing you to speak publicly if violations occur, despite any non-disclosure agreements." As the lawyers finalized the settlement details, Sarah received an unexpected message from Eleanor Caldwell, requesting a meeting at a small cafe away from media attention. This time Sarah brought Ethan with her. He deserved to meet the woman who had helped protect their future. Eleanor was already seated when they arrived, a cup of tea cooling before her. Her eyes widened slightly at the sight of Ethan, then softened with unmistakable emotion. "You must be the young mechanic I've heard so much about," she said warmly, extending her hand. "I'm Eleanor." Ethan shook her hand with surprising confidence. "Thank you for helping my mom. Was it scary to stand up to Mr. Caldwell?" Eleanor's smile was bittersweet. It was. But sometimes the scary thing is the right thing. As Ethan occupied himself with a notebook at the next table, giving the adults some privacy, Eleanor turned to Sarah. "I saw the settlement offer was announced. Congratulations." "We couldn't have done it without your help," Sarah acknowledged gratefully. "I don't know how to thank you." "Seeing your workshop continue is thanks enough," Eleanor said sincerely. "But there's something else you should know." She hesitated. "Robert knows it was me who provided the documents. There will be consequences, personal, financial, possibly legal." Sarah was alarmed. "Is there anything we can do to help?" "Our legal team," Eleanor shook her head. "I made my choice with open eyes, Ms. Mitchell. I've spent 15 years regretting my silence during my marriage, watching Robert's patterns repeat with other young talents, other families. This was my opportunity to finally break that cycle." Sarah studied the older woman, seeing beyond the polished exterior to the strength beneath. "Will you be all right?" "I will," Eleanor said with quiet certainty. "Actually, I'm planning to leave the country for a while, join James in Europe. It's long overdue." She glanced at Ethan, who was deeply absorbed in his sketching. "He reminds me of James at that age. The same focus, the same natural curiosity. Would you like to meet him sometime?" Sarah offered. "James, I'm sure Ethan would love to know someone who understands what it's like to have unusual abilities." Eleanor's eyes brightened. "I would like that very much. James is doing remarkable work with sustainable energy systems in Denmark, perhaps when things settle down." She left the thought unfinished, but the possibility hung between them, a tentative bridge toward future connection. As they parted, Eleanor pressed a small box into Sarah's hand. "For Ethan, when the time is right." It belonged to James, his first toolkit. Robert gave it to him before ambition overshadowed fatherhood. Inside was a collection of precision tools, each perfectly sized for a child's hands, the name James engraved on the metal case. Her passing of the torch from one exceptional child to another, connected by circumstance and separated by the choices of the adults around them. That evening, as news of the settlement spread, and congratulatory messages poured in from workshop families and supporters, Sarah watched Ethan working at their kitchen table, modifying a small electric motor for his rocket project. His face was illuminated with concentration, his hands moving with natural precision among tools and components. The legal battle was ending, but Sarah knew their journey was just beginning. The workshop would continue, now with secure funding and protection from interference. Ethan would grow, his talents developing in an environment of support rather than exploitation, and somewhere across the ocean, another young man with similar gifts was building a future of his own making. Proof that independence was possible, That talent need not be surrendered to corporate control. What none of them yet realized was that Gregory Palmer remained a wild card in their story, his political ambitions temporarily overshadowed by Caldwell's dramatic legal collapse, but by no means abandoned. The aspiring mayor had been watching events unfold from a calculated distance, already formulating a new approach to inserting himself into the narrative of Ethan's success. The immediate crisis had passed, but the underlying tensions between public and private interests, between nurturing talent and controlling it, between powerful institutions and individual determination, continued to shape the landscape around them. The workshop had survived its first major challenge, but others would inevitably follow. For tonight, however, Sarah allowed herself to simply appreciate the moment. Her son engaged in creative work, their home secure, their future once again their own to shape. The victory, hard won through unexpected alliances and personal courage, had reaffirmed what she had known from the beginning, that Ethan's gift belonged to him alone, to develop in service of his own dreams rather than others' ambitions. As she joined him at the table, helping to hold a delicate component in place while he soldered a connection, Sarah felt a deep certainty settle within her. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, guided by the principles that had brought them through this conflict: integrity, independence, and the unwavering belief that talent flourishes best when it remains free. Vou prosseguir com o 8º capítulo. Type a text markdown. 6 months after the settlement, the Mitchell-Rodriguez Community Workshop had evolved from a local initiative into a recognized educational model. Visitors from across the country came to observe their approach to technical education, the peer teaching methods, the focus on practical problem solving, and most importantly, the philosophy that knowledge belonged to the community rather than to corporate interests. The workshop now occupied a renovated warehouse, having outgrown its original storefront. The expanded space allowed for specialized areas, basic mechanics for beginners, advanced projects for returning students, a dedicated section for sustainable energy experiments, and a small computer lab where children learned programming to control the machines they built. Sarah had completed her business management certificate and now directed operations full-time, coordinating a team of volunteer instructors and developing curriculum alongside Rodriguez. The trust fund from Caldwell's original payment remained largely untouched, a safety net rather than an operating budget, as the workshop now sustained itself through a combination of community donations, educational grants, and consulting fees from schools implementing their methods. Ethan, now 10, had blossomed in the aftermath of the conflict. With the legal pressure lifted, his natural exuberance returned, tempered by a new maturity born from witnessing adult power struggles firsthand. He divided his time between his own education, his role as a peer instructor, and increasingly sophisticated projects that combined his mechanical intuition with growing interests in renewable energy and aerospace engineering. The settlement had effectively removed Caldwell from their lives. True to the terms, his company maintained a strict distance, though Sarah occasionally noticed his name in business news, usually regarding declining stock values and shareholder unrest. Eleanor's documents had triggered investigations beyond their own case, exposing patterns that had repercussions throughout Caldwell Industries. But as one threat receded, another emerged more clearly. Gregory Palmer had launched his mayoral campaign in earnest, with a platform centered on innovation and opportunity for Westchester County. His campaign materials prominently featured images of children engaged in hands-on learning, not specifically the workshop, but clearly inspired by it. His rhetoric emphasized partnership between public and private sectors to nurture the next generation of innovators, language that set alarm bells ringing for Sarah. "He's co-opting our narrative," she observed to Lisa Parker during one of their regular strategy sessions, making it sound like he's been supportive all along, when in reality he tried to use regulatory pressure to force us into his campaign. Lisa nodded, reviewing Palmer's latest press release. "Classic political maneuvering. He can't claim direct credit for your success anymore, so he's positioning himself as representing the values you've demonstrated. It's frustrating but not unexpected. Should we respond publicly, set the record straight? I wouldn't. Lisa advised. Direct confrontation gives him an opportunity to engage, to make it seem like you're on equal footing in a debate. Better to simply continue your work, let your actions speak for themselves. The wisdom of this approach became apparent in early spring, when Palmer's campaign team reached out with what they described as a collaborative opportunity. The city was planning an innovation fair at the convention center, showcasing local technological and educational initiatives. The workshop was invited to participate prominently, with the unspoken implication that Palmer would be front and center at the event, positioning himself alongside their success. Sarah discussed the invitation with Rodriguez and their advisory board, which now included Eleanor Caldwell, participating remotely from Denmark. The consensus was strategic: accept the invitation but on their own terms. We'll participate, Sarah informed Palmer's campaign manager, but we'll be representing ourselves independently. No campaign materials at our exhibit, no political speeches while our students are presenting, and full editorial control over how the workshop is described in promotional materials. This careful navigation of Palmer's political overtures continued throughout the spring. As election season intensified, the workshop maintained its independence while participating in community events, refusing to be either overtly oppositional or politically affiliated. On a warm Saturday in May, Sarah was overseeing the workshop's weekly open house when she noticed an unfamiliar visitor observing Ethan's demonstration of a small wind turbine he had designed. The man was in his early 30s, with thoughtful eyes and a manner of quiet attention that reminded her of someone, though she couldn't immediately place who. "Impressive work," he commented to Ethan in lightly accented English. "I've modified the blade pitch to optimize for lower wind speeds, haven't you?" Ethan brightened at the technical observation. "Yes, most commercial designs are optimized for higher velocities, but around here we rarely get those conditions. I'm trying to make it efficient for real-world use." The man nodded appreciatively. "Smart approach. Have you considered a hybrid system? Perhaps solar panels to complement during still days?" "Actually, yes." Ethan pointed to his notebook, where additional sketches showed integrated photovoltaic elements. "That's phase 2 of the project." Sarah approached, extending her hand. "I'm Sarah Mitchell, Ethan's mom and the workshop director. Are you visiting from one of the school districts?" The man smiled, shaking her hand. "James Caldwell. I'm visiting from Copenhagen, actually." Sarah froze momentarily, the name registering. "You're Eleanor's son." His smile widened, revealing a resemblance to his mother in the eyes. "She told me I should stop by while I'm in the States. Said there was a remarkable young engineer I should meet." He glanced at Ethan, who was listening with interest. She wasn't exaggerating. "Your mother has been an incredible supporter," Sarah said warmly, the initial shock giving way to genuine pleasure. "She participates in our advisory meetings remotely, but it's wonderful to meet you in person." "Mom mentioned you might be here," Ethan said, studying James with undisguised curiosity. "She said you work with sustainable energy systems in Denmark." James nodded. "That's right. My company develops integrated renewable solutions for urban environments. Very similar to what you're working on with this turbine, actually, just on a larger scale." The connection between James and Ethan was immediate and profound. Two minds similarly wired, separated by age, but united by a natural understanding of mechanical systems and a drive to improve them. As Sarah observed their interaction, she noticed something else. James carried himself with a quiet confidence that seemed hard-won, comfortable in his technical expertise, but without the need to dominate or impress. "Would you like a tour of the whole facility?" Sarah offered. As they moved through the workshop, James shared aspects of his own journey, his early fascination with mechanics, the pressure from his father that had nearly extinguished that passion, his eventual escape to Europe, where he could rebuild his relationship with technology on his own terms. "It took years to unlearn the association between technical achievement and my father's approval," he explained as they watched a group of children assembling solar-powered cars. "To rediscover the pure joy of problem-solving without the weight of expectations." Sarah nodded, understanding completely. "That's exactly what we're trying to preserve for Ethan and the other children here. The intrinsic satisfaction of making things work, separate from external validation or commercial value." After the tour, James joined them for lunch at a nearby cafe, where their conversation deepened. He spoke candidly about his complicated relationship with his father, offering insights that helped Sarah better understand the dynamics they had encountered. "My father sees exceptional ability as a resource to be harnessed and directed," James explained. "Head's not malicious exactly. In his mind, he's optimizing talent for maximum impact. The problem is that his definition of impact is narrowly focused on corporate metrics and personal legacy." "Did he ever try to—" Sarah hesitated, unsure how to phrase the question delicately. "Regain control after I left?" James finished for her. "Not directly. Once I was legally an adult and geographically removed, his interest waned. I didn't fit the narrative anymore." He stirred his coffee thoughtfully. "That's the thing about my father. His obsession with talent is genuine, but it's conditional on being able to shape its direction. Independent thought is inconvenient." Ethan, who had been listening intently to this adult conversation, asked the question Sarah had been carefully avoiding. "Do you ever talk to your dad now?" A shadow crossed James's face. "Rarely. We exchange formal communications on birthdays and holidays. The relationship is cordial but distant." "I'm sorry," Ethan said simply. James smiled, a genuine warmth replacing the momentary sadness. "Don't be. I have a good life, meaningful work, and a much healthier relationship with my mother now that she's moved to Denmark." He looked directly at Ethan. "The most important thing I've learned is that your gift belongs to you, not to your parents, not to corporations, not to politicians. You get to decide how to use it." As their lunch concluded, James extended an unexpected invitation. "I'm giving a presentation at Columbia University tomorrow about renewable energy integration in urban planning. It's aimed at graduate students, but I think Ethan might find it interesting. Would you both like to attend?" The presentation proved transformative for Ethan. Seeing James, someone who shared his intuitive understanding of mechanical systems, speaking confidently to a room full of advanced students and faculty, presenting innovative solutions to real-world problems, provided a powerful vision of a possible future. On the train ride home, Ethan was uncharacteristically quiet, processing what he had witnessed. Finally, he turned to Sarah with determination in his eyes. "Mom, I know what I want to do when I grow up." Sarah smiled. "Build sustainable energy systems like James?" Kind of," Ethan said thoughtfully. "But not just building them, teaching other kids how they work. Like we do at the workshop, but bigger." He gestured expansively. "I want to help make sure everyone understands how to fix things, how to make clean energy, how to build stuff that helps people. Not just rich people or companies, but everyone." Sarah felt a swell of pride so intense it brought tears to her eyes. In that moment, she saw that the true victory of their struggle wasn't just maintaining Ethan's independence from Caldwell's influence. It was nurturing a vision that transcended individual talent to embrace community responsibility. James remained in New York for a week, spending several afternoons at the workshop and developing a mentor relationship with Ethan that continued via video calls after he returned to Denmark. His presence catalyzed new directions for the workshop's curriculum, particularly in renewable energy education. As summer approached, the workshop prepared for its most ambitious program yet, a 2-week intensive camp where students would build a complete solar-powered system for a local community garden, providing electricity for irrigation, lighting, and a small greenhouse. The project had drawn attention from educational organizations nationwide, with educators coming to observe their methodology. Palmer's mayoral campaign, meanwhile, had entered its final phase before the primary election. His team made one last attempt to associate with the workshop's success, requesting that Ethan appear at a campaign event focused on youth innovation. Sarah's polite but firm refusal triggered a final revealing exchange. "Ms. Mitchell," Palmer's campaign manager said during a tense phone call, "the councilman has been extremely patient with your independence. He could have been a powerful ally during your legal troubles with Caldwell. Moving forward, having the mayor's office as a supporter rather than an obstacle would seem advantageous for your workshop's future." The implied threat was clear, but Sarah was no longer intimidated. "Please convey to Mr. Palmer that the workshop remains non-partisan and educational in nature. We wish him well in his campaign, but we will not be participating in political events regardless of the candidate. The following day, a building inspector appeared at the workshop, the first such visit since the settlement with Caldwell. His examination was meticulous, his manner professional but unyielding. He identified several potential code violations that would require immediate attention. Palmer's last attempt at leverage, Rodriguez observed after the inspector left. Elections in 3 weeks. He's reminding us he still has regulatory tools at his disposal. Sarah nodded, reviewing the citation list. These are all minor issues, easily addressed. But the message is clear. Cooperate or face bureaucratic obstacles. Their response was strategic rather than confrontational. Sarah contacted the local newspaper, not Thompson at the Tribune, but a different reporter known for covering municipal affairs, and invited them to document the workshop's compliance process. We're grateful for the city's thoroughness in ensuring safety standards, she told the reporter, as cameras captured the installation of additional fire extinguishers and accessibility features. As an educational facility serving children, we welcome any opportunity to improve our safety protocols. The resulting article, titled "Award-Winning Youth Workshop Embraces Enhanced Safety Standards," included quotes from parents praising the facility's commitment to student welfare. Palmer's attempted pressure tactic had been transformed into positive publicity for the workshop, with no mention of political connections or campaign events. 2 days before the primary election, Palmer made one final desperate attempt to force their cooperation. His office issued a press release announcing a special commendation for Ethan Mitchell, to be presented at Palmer's Election Eve rally. The release implied that Ethan would be in attendance, speaking about how Palmer's visionary support had enabled the workshop's success. Sarah immediately issued a correction through Lisa's office, stating that neither Ethan nor any workshop representative would be attending the event, and that the workshop had not been consulted about the commendation. The resulting media confusion forced Palmer to publicly backtrack, claiming a scheduling misunderstanding, an embarrassing stumble in the campaign's final days. On election night, Sarah and Ethan watched the results come in from their apartment, a quiet counterpoint to the hectic activity of the previous weeks. Palmer lost the primary by a narrow margin, his defeat attributed partly to last-minute questions about his campaign's integrity following the workshop controversy. As the final numbers were announced, Ethan looked up from the robot arm he was tinkering with on the living room floor. "Does this mean we're safe now?" "From both Mr. Caldwell and Mr. Palmer." Sarah considered the question thoughtfully. "For now, yes, but there will always be people who see talent as something to control or profit from. The difference is that now we know how to protect ourselves, and more importantly, we've built a community that stands with us." Ethan nodded, returning to his project. After a moment, he said, "James says that in Denmark, they have special laws to protect innovative ideas from being taken by big companies. He thinks we should have those here too." "That's an interesting thought," Sarah said, struck by how Ethan's perspective had expanded beyond his immediate circumstances to consider systemic issues. Maybe that's something the workshop could advocate for in the future. As summer bloomed across Westchester County, the workshop flourished with it. The solar project for the community garden became a neighborhood celebration, with families gathering to watch as children connected the final components and illuminated the space for the first time. Local businesses, impressed by the practical results, began approaching the workshop about similar projects for other community spaces. The settlement money from Caldwell, largely untouched during their legal battle, now served a new purpose, funding scholarships for particularly dedicated students to pursue advanced technical education. The first recipient was Maya, the girl who had shown such intense concentration during that first workshop session. Now 12, she had developed a sophisticated method for capturing and filtering rainwater in urban environments, a project that had won regional science fair recognition. One evening, as Sarah and Ethan walked home from the workshop, they passed a construction site where Caldwell Industries had once planned to build a new research facility. The project had been cancelled following the company's financial troubles, the land now being repurposed for a community college extension campus. "Mom," Ethan said, pausing to study the site, "do you think Mr. Caldwell ever thinks about us?" "About what happened?" Sarah considered the question carefully. I imagine he does, though probably not in the way we might hope. People like Robert Caldwell don't easily change their fundamental perspective. James says his dad never really understood why James left, Ethan continued, that he still thinks James made a mistake by not following his plan. Some people have a hard time recognizing that control isn't the same as nurturing, Sarah explained. They confuse directing someone's path with supporting their journey. Ethan nodded thoughtfully, processing this distinction. I'm glad you didn't let him control my journey. Sarah squeezed his hand, filled with a profound gratitude for their hard-won freedom. Your journey belongs to you, Ethan. My job is just to help you navigate it safely. As they continued home in the gathering dusk, neither was aware that significant changes were taking place at Caldwell Industries. Changes that would soon create an unexpected opportunity for reconciliation and resolution. Robert Caldwell, facing a shareholder revolt and declining health, was being forced to reconsider the legacy he would leave behind. And in that reconsideration, the memory of a determined boy who had fixed his car when no one else would play a pivotal role. Finalmente o nono e último capítulo. ID chapter in type and text markdown, autumn, painted Westchester County in brilliant hues of red and gold, matching the warm glow that had settled over Sarah and Ethan's lives. The workshop had become a community fixture, with waiting lists for each session and growing recognition in educational circles. A documentary team was creating a film about their approach to technical education, following several students through their project development process. On a crisp October morning, almost exactly 1 year after Ethan had first fixed the Aston Martin, Sarah arrived at the workshop to find Jennifer Wilson waiting outside. Caldwell's former assistant looked different, less polished, more human somehow, without the corporate armor she had always worn. Ms. Wilson, Sarah greeted her cautiously. This is unexpected. Jennifer offered a tentative smile. I know I'm not here on official business. I left Caldwell Industries 3 months ago. She hesitated. I'm here with a personal request from Robert Caldwell. Sarah's guard immediately rose. I thought our legal settlement made the boundaries clear. It did, Jennifer acknowledged, and he has no intention of violating those terms. This is different. She took a deep breath. Robert Caldwell is dying, Miss Mitchell. Pancreatic cancer diagnosed 6 months ago. The prognosis is terminal. The news hit Sarah with unexpected force. Despite everything, hearing of Caldwell's impending mortality stirred complicated emotions. I'm sorry to hear that, she said sincerely. But I don't understand what this has to do with us. He's been reviewing his life, Jennifer explained, reconsidering his actions, his priorities. The conflict with you and Ethan, and the subsequent revelations about his pattern of behavior, triggered significant changes at Caldwell Industries. The board has implemented ethical guidelines for working with young innovators. Robert was initially resistant, but his illness has shifted his perspective. Sarah listened skeptically, waiting for the actual request to emerge. He would like to meet with Ethan one last time, Jennifer said finally. Not to reclaim any control or influence, but simply to see the boy who challenged his worldview. To apologize, if you'll permit it. Sarah's immediate instinct was refusal. After everything they had endured, why expose Ethan to one final interaction with the man who had tried to appropriate his talent and threatened their family? This isn't a publicity stunt, Jennifer added, seeming to read Sarah's thoughts. His condition isn't public knowledge yet. This would be entirely private, on your terms, at your chosen location, with whatever safeguards you deem necessary. Why should I consider this? Sarah asked directly. Jennifer's professional facade cracked slightly. Because I've worked with Robert Caldwell for 15 years, and I've never seen him express genuine regret until now. And because, she hesitated, because Eleanor suggested it might provide closure for everyone involved. The mention of Eleanor gave Sarah pause. If Robert's ex-wife, the person who had most reason to distrust him, thought this meeting had value, perhaps it deserved consideration. I'll need to think about this, Sarah said finally. And more importantly, I need to discuss it with Ethan. This has to be his decision, not mine. That evening, Sarah presented the situation to Ethan as neutrally as possible, careful not to influence his response with her own lingering reservations. She was continually surprised by his emotional maturity, his ability to consider complex situations from multiple perspectives. "Is he really dying?" Ethan asked, his expression solemn. "Yes," Sarah confirmed. "He doesn't have much time left." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. "I think I should meet with him," he said finally. "James told me once that he wishes he'd had a chance to tell his dad how he felt before they stopped talking. This might be my only chance." Sarah studied her son's face, searching for signs of pressure or obligation. "You don't owe him anything, Ethan. If you don't want to do this, that's completely okay." "I know," Ethan said simply. "But I'm not doing it for him. I'm doing it for me, so I don't have questions later." The meeting was arranged for the following Sunday afternoon at a small private garden adjacent to the hospital where Caldwell was receiving treatment. Sarah established clear parameters. 1 hour maximum, she would be present throughout, and Lisa Parker would accompany them as an additional safeguard. When they arrived, Robert Caldwell was seated in a wheelchair beside a Japanese maple tree, its leaves a brilliant scarlet against the autumn sky. The once imposing figure had diminished dramatically, thinner, paler, the arrogant posture replaced by the slight stoop of physical decline. Yet his eyes remained sharp, taking in Ethan's approach with undisguised interest. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice weaker but still carrying that distinctive tone of authority. "Both of you?" Sarah nodded formally, her hand resting protectively on Ethan's shoulder. "Mr. Caldwell." "Please sit." He gestured to the bench opposite his wheelchair. As they settled, he focused his attention on Ethan. "You've grown taller," he observed. "And you're still fixing things, I hear. Building new things too." Ethan nodded, studying the man with open curiosity rather than fear. "Our workshop just finished a solar power system for the community garden on Elm Street. I designed part of the battery storage solution." A smile flickered across Caldwell's gaunt face. "Impressive. Renewable energy is the future, of course. I was too slow to recognize that. One of many miscalculations." He shifted, slightly wincing with the movement. "I owe you both an apology. My behavior was inexcusable. I saw your talent, Ethan, and I instinctively tried to control it rather than support it. It's a pattern I've repeated throughout my life, with profound consequences." The directness of his acknowledgement surprised Sarah. She had expected corporate doublespeak, carefully worded half-apologies. This blunt admission suggested Jennifer might have been right about Caldwell's change in perspective. "Why did you do it?" Ethan asked, the question simple but penetrating. "Why did you try to take me away from my mom? From the workshop?" Caldwell considered the question carefully, seeming to weigh his words. The simple answer would be ambition or greed. But the truth is more complex. He looked past them toward the hospital building, where his remaining days would be spent. "I've spent my life believing that exceptional talent requires exceptional direction, that raw ability must be harnessed and guided by those with the resources and vision to maximize its impact." "Like my father," came a voice from behind them. Sarah turned to find James Caldwell approaching along the garden path, his expression unreadable as he regarded his father. "James," Robert acknowledged, genuine surprise in his voice. "I didn't expect—" "Eleanor called me," James explained, moving to stand beside Ethan and Sarah. "Thought I might have something to contribute to this conversation." He looked down at Ethan with a small smile. "Hope you don't mind me crashing your meeting." Ethan shook his head, clearly pleased to see his mentor. Sarah noticed the complex emotions playing across Robert's face as he observed the easy rapport between his son and the boy he had once tried to control. "As I was saying," Robert continued after a moment, "I believe that talent like yours, like James's, needed institutional structure to reach its full potential. I convinced myself that my intentions were benevolent, that I was offering opportunities beyond what a single parent or a community workshop could provide. But you were wrong," Ethan said, not accusingly but as a simple statement of fact. Robert nodded slowly. "I was wrong. Your success this past year, what you and your mother have built, has demonstrated that quite effectively." He shifted his gaze to James. "As did your path, though it took me far too long to recognize it." An uncomfortable silence settled between father and son, years of distance and misunderstanding hanging in the air between them. "I've been following your work in Denmark," Robert said finally. "Your integrated urban systems approach is revolutionary. Exactly the kind of innovation Caldwell Industries should have been pursuing years ago. James accepted the compliment with a slight nod, his expression guarded. "Why did you want to see Ethan, Dad, really?" Robert's gaze returned to the boy. "Because I needed to acknowledge my mistake, to him, to his mother, and to myself. And because—" he paused, seeming to search for words, "because I wanted to see what might have been possible if I had approached your talent differently. James, if I had supported rather than directed." The raw honesty of this admission visibly affected James, breaking through his careful composure. For a moment, father and son regarded each other with a new understanding. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the beginning of acceptance. Ethan, watching this exchange with keen perception, spoke up. "Mr. Caldwell, did you know that when engines get old, sometimes they need different kinds of maintenance? Parts that worked one way when they were new might need a completely different approach later on." All three adults turned to him, struck by the simple wisdom in his observation. "Is that so?" Robert asked, a genuine smile softening his features. Ethan nodded seriously. "Mr. Rodriguez says the best mechanics understand that machines change over time. The real skill isn't just fixing what's broken, but adapting how you work with each engine as it evolves." Robert Caldwell's laugh was unexpected, a short, genuine sound of appreciation. "Out of the mouths of babes," he murmured, glancing at his son. "A lesson it's taken me a lifetime to begin learning." The conversation that followed was unlike anything Sarah could have anticipated. Stripped of corporate agendas and legal maneuvering, they spoke as people connected by circumstance and shared experience, about talent and responsibility, about the delicate balance between nurturing potential and imposing direction, about the legacy each generation hopes to leave for the next. James shared insights from his work in Denmark, where collaborative innovation was valued over individual ownership. Ethan described his vision for expanding the workshop model nationally, creating spaces where children could develop technical skills in service to their communities. Sarah explained how their approach emphasized process over results, focusing on the joy of discovery rather than measurable outputs. Throughout, Robert Caldwell listened with an attentiveness that seemed new to him, absorbing rather than evaluating, appreciating rather than calculating. Whether this represented genuine transformation or simply the perspective shift that often accompanies mortal illness, Sarah couldn't say. But the impact on Ethan was undeniable. He spoke with growing confidence, articulating ideas about education and technology with remarkable clarity for a 10-year-old. As the hour drew to a close, Robert addressed Sarah directly. "I've made arrangements to establish an endowment for educational initiatives that follow your workshop model," he said. "Independently administered, with no Caldwell Industries involvement beyond the initial funding. The legal documents will be delivered to Ms. Parker's office tomorrow." Sarah's surprise must have shown on her face as Robert continued. "It's not an attempt to claim credit or control. Consider it restitution, and perhaps a small contribution to a more ethical approach to nurturing young talent." Before Sarah could respond, Ethan asked a question that cut to the heart of the matter. "Are you doing this because you're sorry or because you're dying?" The bluntness of the query might have seemed inappropriate from another child, but from Ethan, with his mechanical mind that sought to understand the underlying functions of things, it was perfectly in character. James suppressed a smile while Sarah held her breath, uncertain how Robert would react to such directness. To her surprise, Robert considered the question with genuine thoughtfulness. "Both, I suppose," he admitted finally. "Mortality has a way of clarifying priorities, but the recognition of my errors began before the diagnosis, with your mother's refusal to surrender your independence, with the public exposure of my methods, with the demonstration that there are better ways to nurture exceptional gifts." He looked at his son, ways I failed to discover in time for our relationship. As they prepared to leave, Robert asked for a moment alone with James, a request that his son hesitantly granted. Sarah and Ethan moved to a nearby bench, giving father and son the privacy for what might be their final substantial conversation. "Do you think they'll fix things between them?" Ethan asked, watching the two Caldwells from a distance. Sarah chose her words carefully. "Some breaks are harder to repair than others, but I think having this chance to speak honestly means a lot to both of them. regardless of what comes next. Later that evening, James joined them for dinner at their apartment, bringing Danish pastries and a quiet thoughtfulness after his conversation with his father. As Ethan excitedly showed him recent workshop projects, Sarah prepared coffee in the kitchen, giving them space to continue the mentor relationship that had become so important to her son. "Thank you," James said when he joined her in the kitchen, his voice low enough not to carry to where Ethan was setting up a demonstration of his latest robot. "For giving my father that opportunity today. It was healing in ways I hadn't expected." Sarah handed him a mug. "Ethan made the decision. He has good instincts about these things." "He's extraordinary," James agreed, "but so is his mother." He studied her over the rim of his coffee cup. "You know, my father offered me a position back at Caldwell Industries today. Said the company needs new direction, a different vision for the future." Sarah's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Are you considering it?" James's expression was contemplative rather than dismissive. "I told him I would think about it, not for his sake, but because there might be an opportunity to transform the company's approach to innovation, to implement some of the collaborative models we've developed in Denmark." "That would be quite a change," Sarah observed. "Structural change," James agreed. "The kind that outlasts any individual, even Robert Caldwell." He set his cup down. "I also told him I would only consider it if the company established formal ethical guidelines for working with young inventors, with legal protections for their intellectual property and development rights." Sarah smiled, recognizing the strategic thinking behind this condition. "And his response?" "He's already instructed the legal team to draft the framework," James said with quiet satisfaction. "Whether I ultimately accept the position or not, those protections will be implemented. It's part of the legacy he now wants to leave." As Robert Caldwell's health declined over the following weeks, James divided his time between Denmark and New York, overseeing both his own company and the transformation beginning at Caldwell Industries. Ethan continued to flourish at the workshop, his technical abilities expanding in tandem with his growing interest in educational approaches for other children with specialized talents. The endowment Robert had promised materialized exactly as described. Substantial funding with no controlling conditions, administered by an independent board that included Eleanor Caldwell among its members. The resources allowed for the workshop model to be implemented in 3 additional communities, with plans for further expansion. When news of Robert's passing reached them in early December, Sarah was surprised by Ethan's emotional response. Not grief exactly, but a solemn recognition of connection. He wasn't a good person, Ethan reflected, but he changed at the end. He tried to fix what he broke. Yes, Sarah agreed, he did try, and that matters. The memorial service was a corporate affair, filled with business associates and political figures. Sarah and Ethan attended briefly. Standing at the back of the crowded room, James acknowledged their presence with a grateful nod as he delivered a measured eulogy that balanced honesty about his father's flaws with recognition of his belated efforts at redemption. Afterward, as they walked through the light snow beginning to dust the streets of White Plains, Ethan was unusually reflective. "Mom, remember when you told me that fixing Mr. Caldwell's car was the start of our journey? I've been thinking about where the journey goes next." Sarah looked down at her son, still a child in years but with an old soul's understanding of life's complexities. "What are you thinking?" "I want to help build the new workshops in other cities," Ethan said decisively. "Not just sending plans or talking on video calls. I want to go there, help them set up, teach the first classes." He looked up at her, suddenly concerned. "Would that be okay? If we traveled sometimes to help other communities start their own programs?" Sarah felt her heart expand with pride and a bittersweet recognition of his growing independence. "I think that would be wonderful, Ethan. Your experience would be invaluable to them." His face brightened. "James says we could collaborate with his company's educational division in Denmark too. Maybe even visit next summer to see how they teach technical skills there." The path stretching before them was far different from anything Sarah could have imagined that fateful night at Caldwell's charity gala. What had begun as a moment of public humiliation, transformed by Ethan's unexpected talent, had evolved into a mission that now extended beyond their community, a vision for education that honored children's gifts without exploiting them. As they reached the workshop, now closed for the day, but glowing with potential in the gathering dusk. Sarah reflected on the strange, complex journey that had brought them here. Robert Caldwell's challenge had been intended as a cruel amusement for his wealthy guests. Instead, it had catalyzed a movement that would outlast him, guided by the very independence he had initially sought to control. Inside, they found Rodriguez preparing materials for the next day's classes, his dedication unwavering throughout their journey. On a workbench nearby sat Ethan's latest project, a teaching model that demonstrated how various renewable energy sources could work together in an integrated system. James had been advising on the design remotely, sharing insights from his professional work while respecting Ethan's own creative approach. "Mr. Rodriguez," Ethan announced as they hung up their coats, "I've decided I want to help start the new workshops in other cities. Mom says it's okay if we travel sometimes." Rodriguez smiled, his weathered face crinkling with pride. "Spreading the knowledge, huh? That's what it's all about, kid. Fixing what's broken, building what's needed, teaching others to do the same." As winter settled over Westchester County, the workshop continued its quiet revolution, creating a space where children could discover their capabilities without the weight of adult ambitions, where knowledge was shared rather than hoarded, where community benefit took precedence over individual profit. The model was spreading, gaining recognition in educational circles and inspiring similar initiatives across the country. The journey that had begun with a wealthy man's challenge and a boy's determination had transformed not just Sarah and Ethan's lives, but touched hundreds of others. The children who discovered new confidence in their abilities, the parents who watched their children flourish, the communities that benefited from young people empowered to solve local problems. One evening, as snow fell gently outside the workshop windows, Sarah watched Ethan guiding a group of children through the final assembly of their renewable energy demonstration. His patience, his clarity, his genuine joy in sharing knowledge rather than displaying it, these were the qualities that defined his true gift, beyond any mechanical aptitude. Maya, now one of the workshop's advanced students, approached with a tablet displaying a news article. "Ms. Mitchell, have you seen this? They're featuring our workshop model in the National Education Conference next month." Sarah scanned the article, noting that the workshop was being presented as an example of community-centered technical education that prioritizes collaborative innovation over competitive achievement. The journey had come full circle. What had begun as one child's talent was now reshaping educational approaches for thousands. As the last students departed with their parents, Ethan joined Sarah by the windows, watching the snow transform the familiar landscape into something new and beautiful. "Mum," he said thoughtfully, "do you remember what you told me after Mr. Caldwell's party, when I asked if fixing his car was wrong because it led to all that trouble?" Sarah nodded, recalling the conversation clearly. "I said we can't live our lives fearing the unexpected consequences of doing the right thing." "I've been thinking about that," Ethan continued. "Maybe the unexpected consequences are the most important part. If I'd just fixed the car and nothing else happened, it would have been cool but not transformative. All the hard stuff that came after, that's what created the workshop and all the other workshops now. That's what's helping hundreds of kids discover what they can do." Sarah put her arm around his shoulders, struck by the wisdom in his observation. "You're right. It's not just about the initial action, but how we respond to what follows, the choices we make when challenges arise." Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the old year's landscape with the promise of new beginnings. Within the workshop, surrounded by the tools and projects that represented their journey, mother and son stood together, their bond strengthened by the challenges they had faced, their vision expanded by the possibilities they had discovered. The wealthy man's challenge, intended as a moment of cruel entertainment, had instead sparked a movement guided by entirely different values: knowledge shared rather than controlled, talent nurtured rather than exploited, community elevated over corporate interest. In fixing one broken engine, Ethan had set in motion the repair of something far more significant: the relationship between exceptional ability and the world that benefits from it. As they prepared to close the workshop for the evening, Ethan paused by his workbench, making one final adjustment to his renewable energy model. The small windmill began to turn, powering tiny lights that illuminated a miniature community, a perfect metaphor for the journey they had traveled and the path that stretched before them. "Ready to go home?" Sarah asked. Ethan nodded, taking one last look at his creation. "Ready? But let's come in early tomorrow. I have tentar novamente e continuar a editar plotted story completion and final narrative elements." Parece que o capítulo 9 foi cortado antes de terminar completamente. Preciso completar este capítulo e então adicionar a chamada à ação conforme solicitado nas instruções. Vou continuar de onde parou. Ethan estava olhando para sua criação e disse que queria chegar cedo amanhã. Preciso finalizar a narrativa, adicionar fim da história. Criar uma chamada à ação criativa que se integre organicamente à narrativa. Vou completar este último capítulo e adicionar esses elementos conforme solicitado. Vou completar o capítulo 9 e finalizar a história. ED Chapter 9 Continuation. Type your text markdown. Ethan nodded, taking one last look at his creation. "Ready, but let's come in early tomorrow. I have some ideas for improving the storage capacity on the model." And Maya asked for help with her water filtration project. Sarah smiled at his endless enthusiasm. "Of course." The journey continues, right? As they walked through the gently falling snow toward home, Ethan's mind was already racing with new possibilities, new connections to be made, new problems to solve. And Sarah, watching her son's face illuminated by the streetlights reflecting off the snow, understood that the true gift had never been just his mechanical ability, but his capacity to see the world as something that could be continuously improved through knowledge shared and applied with compassion. The challenge that Robert Caldwell had issued that night in his mansion had been meant to humiliate. Instead, it had unleashed a movement that would far outlast him, built on principles he had only begun to understand in his final days. One boy fixing one luxury car had sparked a chain of events that was now fixing something far more important: the way talent was nurtured, knowledge was shared, and communities were empowered. As they reached their apartment building, Ethan looked up at the night sky, where a few stars were visible through breaks in the clouds. "Mom," he said quietly, "I think we're going to need a bigger workshop soon. There are so many more kids who want to learn." "Then we'll build one," Sarah promised, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, not as a cleaning lady and her mechanically gifted son, but as equal partners in a journey that had only just begun. For in that moment, standing in the gently falling snow with the workshop behind them and endless possibilities ahead, Sarah and Ethan Mitchell had discovered the most important lesson of all: that true legacy isn't measured in wealth or corporate achievements, but in the lives touched and the knowledge shared. And by that measure, their journey was already a remarkable success, with its greatest chapters still waiting to be written.